Chapter 647. The black fog in the distance seemed to be very close, but in fact, even though Ron and the rest flew, it still took them 2 days to reach it. "We're here," Ron shouted, and with a flip of his body, he landed directly. Shea also landed on the ground with Nicole. Bin and Susie looked at each other and also landed behind Ron. The ancient ruins, the land of death. Only when they got closer did they realize that the black fog was unimaginably huge. An area of thousands of kilometers was completely shrouded in the black fog. "Nicole, is your father here?" Ron frowned and asked when they arrived at the land of death. This did not seem like a place where there were any living people. Nicole nodded first and then shook her head. "No, I don't know. Let's look around first." After saying that, she ignored the rest and walked into the black fog. Susie gritted her teeth and followed. Bin and the rest did not want to be left behind, and all of them followed. Ron and Shea looked at each other, took a deep breath, and walked into the black fog. The black fog was faint and not dense. It was like a fog, making it unreal. The scenery within 10 meters could still be seen clearly, but the scenery beyond that was completely invisible. Stepping into this land, the first feeling that Ron had was desolation. This place was like a once prosperous but now abandoned city. There were dilapidated walls everywhere, and as far as the eye could see, it was desolation. On the other side, the undead from the main plane were full of shock. The arrogance on Bin's face had disappeared, and in its place was deep humility and a trace of imperceptible fear. He looked around uneasily and shrank his neck. "Susie, did your father really come here?" Susie's gaze wandered, and she shook her head. "I don't know, but I can feel that there is an aura left behind by my father here." "Your father's aura?" Bin was shocked. His eyes flashed quickly, and he thought for a moment before saying, "This can only mean that your father came here before. It can't prove that he's still alive." "Maybe," said Susie calmly. The broken city walls, the fallen pillars, and the statue with only half of its body left were all telling of the city's former glory. The dense fog was like walking through a maze, and it was easy to get lost. However, Nicole felt as if she had returned to her own home. Whenever she encountered an unknown place, she would only ponder for a moment before continuing in a certain direction. Susie and Bin followed him in as if they were used to it. "They seem to know this place," Shea whispered. Ron gently nodded. He thought for a moment and said, "Shea, don't you feel that this black fog is like something?" "What is it?" Shea asked curiously. "Curtain of darkness," Ron replied. Shea nodded. "I see." The group of people walked forward slowly. The atmosphere was a little gloomy. Nicole walked in front of them silently. As she walked, her eyes revealed a sad look. As they were walking, Bin suddenly stopped in his tracks and shouted coldly, "Who is it? Come out." Susie didn't even think about it. A mass of black gas suddenly blasted out. The direction she blasted was above her head. Boom! With a loud sound, countless dust fell from the sky. Because no one expected Susie to suddenly make a move, they couldn't dodge in time and were all covered by the dust. Cough, cough, cough. The dust that had accumulated over the years was not just for show. For a moment, everyone turned into white people. Some people coughed loudly. Ouch! As the dust fell, a scream came from the dust. The figure fell heavily to the ground and couldn't get up for a long time. "It's a goblin." Ron reluctantly opened his eyes and saw a small figure. It was a goblin. Goblins were a race of extremely short stature. They were only about 1 meter tall. An adult goblin was only a little taller than a human child. It was said that goblins were closely related to dwarves and pygmies. However, dwarves and pygmies didn't recognize this relationship. The reason was simple. Dwarves were famous for their warriors and musketeers, while pygmies were famous for their mages and thieves. Goblins, on the other hand, had no talent for strength or magic. As a result, they were looked down upon and were ashamed to be associated with them. Legend had it that goblins were a race famous for making machinery. However, this craft had long been lost among the goblins of the Shu'alan continent. Now, goblins could only escape by burrowing into the ground. They were a dirty and inferior race. Susie's attack just now had blown off the left leg of that goblin. Fresh blood flowed out. That goblin clutched his broken left leg and couldn't stop screaming. The goblin in front of them looked like a child. He was dirty all over, as if he'd been dug out from the mud. His clothes hadn't been washed for a long time. His human-like face was covered in a thick layer of dirt. At this moment, he was staring with wide eyes at more than 10 strong people in front of him. His eyes were filled with fear. Jibin snorted coldly. I was wondering who was spying on us. So it's a goblin. Bah, inferior race. Jibin spat out a mouthful of saliva. He looked at the little goblin with a cruel grin in his eyes. Ha ha, you inferior race. You've dirted my clothes. You'll pay with your life. A skinny hand slowly reached out. With a light grasp, a green flame appeared in the palm of his hand. The flame kept dancing, emitting a faint light. The goblin child seemed to understand his fate. He was so scared that he couldn't speak. His eyes were wide with fear as he clutched his broken leg and kept retreating. For the high undead from the main plane, this inferior race in front of them was like an ant in their eyes. Everyone's face showed a faint expression, which was a kind of indifference to weak life forms. At this moment, Ron couldn't stand it anymore. His face sank slightly, and there was a strong anger in his eyes. A child as dirty as a beggar, with frightened eyes and a broken leg that was bleeding. This scene completely overlapped with the scene in Ron's mind. Ron seemed to see the appearance of his beloved Grandpa Zari when he died. Grandpa Zari was killed because he had dirted the clothes of a noble. That was a kind of dignity, the dignity of the weak that had been desecrated by the strong. The life of the weak was not as important as the clothes of the strong. Go to hell, Jibin sneered. He raised a skinny hand and threw the green flame at the goblin child. At this moment, Jibin's hand strangely stopped in the air because a stronger hand stopped him. Jibin paused for a moment. He looked back, and there was a strong anger on his face. What are you doing? Facing Jibin's murderous gaze, Ron didn't shrink back. He stared at Jibin's eyes and said word by word, I won't allow you to kill him. Jibin flew into a rage when he heard this. Who do you think you are? Are you worthy of stopping me? Ron smiled and didn't say anything. He coldly looked at the other party. Jibin's face was swept away in front of everyone. His pupils shrank, and there was a strong murderous intent in his eyes. Inferior race, do you think that you can behave atrociously in front of my noble undead race just because you practice necromancy? I'm going to kill you. You can try, Ron said provocatively with a sneer on his face. You. Jibin's eyes were full of murderous intent. However, when he met Ron's calm gaze, he shrank back. A necromancer at the peak of the sacred domain was not an existence to be trifled with. In a one-on-one situation, Jibin didn't have the confidence to defeat this young human who practiced necromancy. Jibin clenched his teeth and looked at Susie, indicating for her to attack together and kill this arrogant guy in front of him. However, he was immediately disappointed. Susie hesitated and gently shook her head. From her eyes, it could be seen that she was deeply afraid of Ron. They were both necromancers, but Ron gave Susie an unfathomable feeling. She didn't dare to act rashly. Are you in a lot of pain? Wait, I'll heal you. At this time, a clear voice sounded. It was Nicole who had walked over to the goblin child and asked with concern. The child retreated in fear. He looked at everyone with a gaze full of distrust. Nicole chanted in a low voice. An array of light was emitted from her body. The soul fluctuation was transmitted directly to the goblin child. In a short while, the goblin child's broken leg grew back. The goblin child rubbed his eyes, and there was a look of surprise in his eyes. He couldn't believe the reality in front of him. That broken leg could actually grow back immediately? Plop. The goblin child didn't say anything else and knelt down to kowtow, mumbling some incomprehensible language. Don't do this. Nicole jumped in fright and immediately helped him up. Then, she mumbled a bunch of words. It seemed that the two of them were communicating in the same language. Ron could tell that the two of them were speaking in the ancient elven language, but unfortunately, he couldn't understand it. After the conversation, the goblin child seemed to have let down his guard and became closer to Nicole. However, he still looked at the others with fear in his eyes. "Brother-in-law, you can't kill him. He is a native of this place and has lived here for many years. I think he can help us," Nicole said to Ji-bin after a short conversation with the goblin child. "Umph." Ji-bin coldly snorted when he heard this. He suddenly withdrew his hand and fiercely glared at Ron. His mouth moved, but he didn't make a sound. Ron faintly smiled and also took a step back. If they really fought, Ron wasn't afraid. The terrifying might of the 4th chapter of the Book of Death, Death Elegy, could thoroughly bury this group of people. He was very confident in this point. Just like that, the small disturbance was settled. As Nicole continued to speak in the ancient elven language, the goblin child's brows gradually relaxed. He excitedly nodded his head and pulled Nicole's hand forward, as if he wanted to take her somewhere. Everyone looked at each other and silently followed. On the way, Ron finally understood why these goblins had appeared here after Nicole's explanation. In a land of death, the faint undead canopy formed a natural barrier that gave the entire goblin tribe enough protection. The environment here was vile and desolate, and there were no treasures to covet. For tens of thousands of years, it had formed a state of isolation, allowing the weak goblin race to settle down here for generations. Many of them had never seen outsiders since birth and didn't know what the outside world was like. They could only communicate in the ancient elven language. The arrival of Ron's group piqued their curiosity. Ron followed Nicole and the goblin child. Sure enough, they saw more and more goblins. Countless heads popped out of the ground and scanned the crowd with vigilant eyes. They held crude weapons in their hands, and even some branches that no one knew where they got them from. This was a large group of goblins. Although there were many goblins, they weren't enough to pose a threat to Ron's group. As long as Ji-bin wanted to, he could exterminate them with a wave of his hand. The goblins seemed to be aware of this, so they didn't dare to make a move and only dared to follow from a distance. As they walked, Ron heard a "Kacha" sound. He didn't know what his foot touched, but when he looked down, he saw a shattered skull. "The skull's black. I was staring at him." At this time, he heard Nicole's voice. Chapter 648. This was a dilapidated temple. Skeletons were scattered in front of the door, and the broken and mottled walls seemed to speak of the past glory. Darkness filled the air, and the closer they got to the temple, the more nervous they felt. Just as Nicole was about to step into the dilapidated temple, she was blocked by a group of goblins that suddenly surged out. These goblins were in a disorderly and loose formation, holding crude weapons in their hands. They pointed at the group and said something loudly, as if to stop them from entering. However, although these goblins stopped the group, their eyes were filled with fear, and their legs were clearly trembling. Ron frowned. "What are they saying? They won't let us in." Nicole spoke to them in the ancient elven language for a while, then explained to the group, according to their elders, this is a forbidden area. If outsiders are allowed in, it will bring disaster to the tribe. "They won't let us in?" Gibbon sneered and said arrogantly, "Do they think they're worthy?" Gibbon sneered and pointed his sharp fingernails forward. "Nicole, tell them to get out of the way immediately, or I'll slaughter their entire tribe." Ron frowned. Gibbon's arrogance made him extremely uncomfortable. Nicole let out a sigh and translated Gibbon's words. Of course, her tone became softer. The goblins looked at Gibbon with intense fear on their faces. They discussed in low voices for a while, and finally obediently made way. Although these goblins had not seen the world, they could still sense the other party's powerful strength. They knew that they were no match for him, and wisely chose to retreat. Gibbon snorted coldly. "If only I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have to dirty my hands by killing you." After saying that, he ignored the goblins and strode in with his head held high. Gibbon's group walked in one by one, and the goblins began to blame the goblin child who led the way. The goblin child didn't even dare to raise his head. Nicole looked at the goblin child apologetically, her eyes filled with helplessness. She also followed Gibbon into the dilapidated temple. The goblins didn't dare to be negligent and followed them carefully into the temple. The inside of the dilapidated temple was horrifying. Faint black fog filled the air, and the thick spiderwebs on the walls showed that no one had been here for a long time. Ron strolled into the hall of the temple. For some reason, the layout of this place gave him a sense of familiarity. Ron. At this moment, Shea stopped in her tracks. She narrowed her eyes and looked around. Have you noticed that this place is very similar to our Undercity? Yes. Ron nodded and admitted, it is indeed very similar. Perhaps the layout of the undead's castle is the same. Jeeben glared at the large group of gnomes behind him in disgust. Those gnomes were so scared that they didn't dare to come forward. He snorted coldly with a look of dissatisfaction on his face. These filthy fellows are really annoying. A group of people walked to the door of the room in the main hall. The door was tightly shut, and the white skull on the door knocker looked extremely sinister. The closer they got, the thicker the black fog seemed to be. Nicole took a deep breath and stabilized her emotions. Her pale hand gently pressed on the door, intending to push it open. To Nicole, there was something behind the door that she had been searching for. No. At this moment, an old voice stopped her. Nicole looked back and saw that it was a gnome elder. His beard almost reached the ground. The gnome elder said slowly, the first generation of gnomes said, pushing open this door will bring disaster to all of us. For tens of thousands of years, this door has never been opened. Everything here has been designated as a forbidden area. Leave, outsiders. Your arrival has disturbed our lives. This gnome elder spoke in the common language of the snow orchid continent. It was a bit jerky, but everyone present understood. Except for Ron, Shea, and Nicole. Everyone showed a look of disdain. Can you stop us? Jeeben sneered and said, disaster, what disaster can we have? On the other hand, you lowly old gnome, if you continue to blabber, believe it or not, I'll kill you immediately. Nicole sighed and smiled sweetly. Lord Elder, I'm sorry, but I can't do it. All this time, I've been searching for an answer. If I can't find it, I won't give up. With that, she ignored the crowd and pushed the door open with a gentle push. With a creak, the heavy door was pushed open, and a burst of turbid gas seeped out of the room. The smell was very unpleasant. Compared to the outside, the things in the room were very well preserved, as if no one had touched them before. Ron stood outside and carefully observed the room. Although the room was dark, he could see everything clearly. Suddenly, something entered Ron's eyes, causing his pupils to shrink. This is in the middle of the room. On the wall, a bright red skull was engraved on it. The skull looked very sinister, like the color of blood. After tens of thousands of years, there was no trace of it fading. The blood skull flag. Ron was shocked, and his heart thumped loudly. The image in front of him was none other than the image of the Scourge Church's blood skull flag. Could it be that this ancient ruin was related to the Scourge Church? Susie looked at Ron strangely and nodded lightly. Your eyesight is not bad, to be able to tell that this is the blood skull flag of the Scourge Army. The blood skull flag has disappeared for a long time. Saying this, she let out an imperceptible sigh. Is this a ruin left behind by the Scourge Army? Jeeben frowned and said. At this moment, his heart was completely relaxed. That person was not here. Perhaps he had been here before, but he had completely disappeared, leaving behind only a faintly discernible aura. At this moment, Nicole's face was pale, and her body was trembling uncontrollably. She closed her eyes tightly, and large beads of tears flowed down her face silently. Father! Nicole took a few steps forward and knelt on the ground with a plop. Her fingers gently stroked the bright red skull as she sobbed softly. A gentle breeze blew, bringing desolation. Everyone was affected by Nicole's sorrowful mood, and even Susie became silent. At this moment, Ron seemed to have thought of something. From a blood skull flag, this place of death was undoubtedly the remains of the Scourge Church in the Shualon continent. Nicole had come here to find her father. Then, could her father be? Could it be? Ron looked at Nicole in disbelief. The more he connected the dots, the more he felt that it was possible. As expected, Susie's next words confirmed his guess. At this moment, Susie sighed silently. Nicole, I've told you long ago that Father is dead, but you never believed me, and always let your emotions get the better of you. Susie's voice lowered. I acknowledge Father's greatness. He was the one who created the entire Scourge army single-handedly, and made it the strongest force in the main plane of the dead. But it's all in the past. The glory of the past is gone. What we descendants need to do is to continue raising the Blood Skull flag and follow in Father's footsteps to recreate the glory of the Scourge army. No, he's not dead. Susie wanted to continue speaking, but Nicole stood up abruptly and interrupted her. Father is God. Gods don't die. I still need to find him. He must still be alive. But you guys, Nicole said sternly. She pointed at Susie, Gibbon, and the others, her face full of malevolence. Susie, don't think that I don't know what you're planning. You've always coveted the Scourge army that Father left behind. And you, Gibbon, you're also the main battle army of the main plane of the dead. Your plague army has always been eyeing the Scourge army. Let me tell you, as long as Father returns, he will take everything back. Under his leadership, the Scourge army will once again return to its peak. Nicole's gaze swept across everyone's faces. She took a deep breath and continued. Father's soul is abnormally strong and almost impossible to destroy. He will definitely return, definitely. Nicole clenched her fists, and her tone was unusually determined. I will definitely find him. I will definitely. I've already gone to all the planes that Father has been to. There's only one plane left. I believe he will definitely be there. At this point, Ron had basically concluded that Nicole's father was the Lich King of the Scourge Church, Hermes. Nicole's true identity was the Lich King's daughter. However, what he said next caused Ron to be even more shocked. That place is called Omros. The final battle between the Scourge army and the Legion of Holy Angels took place in that subplane called Omros. I believe that Father must still be there. Nicole raised her voice. Very good deduction. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance. At this moment, Gibbon's face darkened as he interrupted her. Hand it over immediately, or else. Nicole, I won't let you leave here alive. What do you want? Faced with Gibbon's threat, Nicole took a step back in fright. She looked at Susie and then at Ron, her eyes full of pleading. Since he knew that she was the Lich King's daughter, Ron didn't intend to just stand by and watch. He silently took out the dragonbone staff from his space bag, and the resolute expression on his face showed his determination. Everyone drew their weapons. Ron and Shea stood firmly on Nicole's side, coldly confronting the undead led by Gibbon and Susie. Do you plan to make a move? Humans. Gibbon's face was filled with a sinister smile. Since that's the case, we won't hold back. They were about to fight. All the goblins shrank back, their faces full of fear. Some were so shocked by the powerful undead energy that they couldn't even move. Wait, at this moment, everyone was slightly stunned, as if they had sensed something. They all looked up at the sky, their faces full of shock. It's the power of destruction. Susie shrieked. How is this possible? Why would the power of destruction from the main plane of hell appear here? Could it be? It's a demon. Gibbon quietly felt the powerful energy coming from the distant sky, his face full of fear. This energy caused the depths of his soul to tremble. He clenched his teeth and squeezed out a sentence. Ron looked at the sky and sighed silently, his brows tightly knitted. Chapter 649. It's her, Vitala, the princess of the sea race. Shea's brows furrowed, and she bit her lips. I can feel the undulations of her soul. But how did she suddenly possess the power of destruction? Ron muttered to himself. Moreover, her strength has increased exponentially in a short period of time, and she's already reached the realm of the gods. The arrival of a powerful realm of the gods caused everyone to be alarmed. Among them, none of them had reached the realm of the gods. At this moment, the gnomes were already in a mess, scattering in all directions. Some of the smarter gnomes were desperately drilling into the ground. She really came. She really came. The prophecy was right. The long-haired gnome elder looked at the sky with a stupefied expression, his eyes filled with despair. This is a calamity for the gnomes. It's in this direction. She's really coming for us. Susie's face was distorted with fear. What do we do? She's so fast. How is this possible? How is this possible? Why would the power of destruction from hell appear here? Could it be? Gibbon suddenly raised his head, his face full of shock. They're also here for that thing? Vitala's strength was tyrannical to the extreme, and the violent power of destruction was overwhelming. Before she arrived, the powerful aura of the divine realm had already enveloped the entire area. Bastards. These bastards from hell actually dare to covet our undead's things. Simply unforgivable. Gibbon said fiercely, as if he was telling someone, but also as if he was talking to himself. They? From hell? Ron was shocked when he heard Gibbon's words. Could it be that the demons from hell were also coveting Nicole's things? Or could it be that this was the doing of the demons from hell? The more Ron thought about it, the more likely it was. At this moment, he couldn't help but be curious. What was the thing on Nicole's body? How could it cause a fight between several forces? Nicole's large eyes stared at the sky, and her face turned pale. She seemed to be frightened by this powerful force that had appeared out of nowhere. Suddenly, Gibbon gritted his teeth, and his body flashed as he pounced on Nicole. What are you trying to do? Gibbon was fast, but Ron was even faster. In a flash, he appeared in front of Nicole, blocking Gibbon's movements. Get out of my way, Gibbon shouted. He pushed Ron, but Ron didn't budge. Seeing that he couldn't do anything to Ron, he turned his blood-red eyes to Nicole and fiercely said, "Little bitch, hand that thing over. What is it?" Nicole knew what he was talking about, but she could only play dumb. "Calamity God's staff," Gibbon said in a deep voice, his expression full of anxiety. "What? The Calamity Staff?" Ron was shocked. The Scourge Divine Staff has unparalleled authority. The person who obtains the Scourge Divine Staff will receive the recognition of the Scourge Army and unify the entire Netherworld. That person will become the new Lich King, create the strongest force, and restore the glory of the Scourge Army, Gibbon said hurriedly. He could feel the powerful divine energy coming closer and closer. Cold sweat gradually seeped out from the tip of his nose. He took a step forward and continued speaking. Legend has it that the Scourge Divine Staff fell with the death of the Lich King. However, I know that the Lich King gave this item to you before he died. Nicole, quickly give me the Scourge Divine Staff. I know that it must be with you. After hearing Gibbon's words, Ron's heart slowly sank. He didn't think that Nicole would have such an important item with her. The Scourge Divine Staff, the symbol of the highest authority in the Scourge Army, had disappeared with the death of the Lich King. However, it was now with Nicole. All of this was too inconceivable. Gibbon extended his hand towards Nicole and coldly stared at her. Nicole's eyes reddened and tears flowed down her cheeks. Facing Gibbon's approach, she stubbornly shook her head and shouted, "No, you little ****. When Gibbon heard this, he immediately roared in anger and said loudly, "Don't you ***King know that only the Lich King's right-hand man, the great Dreadlord subordinate, my father, can take on this heavy responsibility? Nicole, how long do you want to hide the Scourge Divine Staff?" Nicole retreated step by step and shook her head with all her might. At this moment, her face was already covered in tears. At this moment, Susie quickly walked over and reprimanded, "Nicole, what time is it now? Are you still trying to play tricks? What are you trying to do? Don't forget that other than our Plague Army, the Terror Army, and the Undead Army also want this item. Hand it over immediately. I know that it must be with you." That's right. That demon from hell also came for the Scourge Divine Staff. Their goal is to use the Scourge Divine Staff to divide the Scourge Army and support their agents to control the entire Netherworld. Nicole, hand the Scourge Divine Staff to me immediately before it's too late. Gibbon said loudly, "Quick, hand over the Scourge Divine Staff." Nicole, are you trying to take this item for yourself? The group of Netherworld experts shouted one after another. They formed a circular formation and closed in on Ron and Nicole, surrounding them in an instant. Shea had already retreated behind Ron. She held her long sword and coldly faced the group of netherworld experts. The demon from the divine realm rapidly approached. At this moment, the netherworld experts were filled with the smell of gunpowder. The ownership of the Scourge Divine Staff was what they were most concerned about. Shea had her back against Ron. Her eyes were filled with deep worry. The experts from the divine realm were about to arrive, and they were constantly fighting amongst themselves. If this continued, Ron, what should we do now? Shea asked softly. At this moment, Ron's heart was in a mess. He already didn't know what to do. He secretly looked at Nicole, only to see that after hearing Gibbon's words, Nicole's face was also filled with hesitation. Ever since the Lich King disappeared, the entire Scourge army was torn apart. Furthermore, the demons from hell had been plotting against the Scourge Church for a long time. Nicole naturally knew this in her heart. They used the power of hell to support the representatives of the Scourge army and control the entire netherworld plane. What should we do? What should we do? As the experts from the divine realm approached, Nicole was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Perhaps the best choice was to hand over the Scourge Divine Staff and let Gibbon take it back to the netherworld plane. If the demons from hell obtained the Scourge Divine Staff, then the entire Scourge army would be unable to make a comeback. Even the entire netherworld plane would be under the command of the demons from hell. Nicole had always kept her father's instructions in mind. She couldn't disappoint him. However, the current situation was something that Nicole didn't want to see. She sighed in her heart. Father, oh father, what do you want me to do now? Gibbon's face lit up when he saw that Nicole was slightly moved. His tone calmed down as he continued to persuade her. Nicole, I'll tell you the truth. Even if you obtain the Scourge Divine Staff, you won't be able to control those experts. In other words, the Scourge Divine Staff won't be able to be used as it should be in your hands. Only my father, the Dread Lord, has the right to inherit it. Gibbon stretched out his hand. Nicole, hurry up and give me the Scourge Divine Staff. It'll be too late if you delay any longer. We're no match for that demon, but the Scourge Divine Staff definitely can't fall into the hands of the demons from hell. Nicole sighed in her heart. Forget it, forget it. Rather than letting the Scourge Divine Staff fall into the hands of the demons from hell, it'd be better to give it to the Dreadlord. No matter what, he used to be her father's subordinate and was a peerless expert of the netherworld plane. Thinking of this, Nicole finally made up her mind. Her trembling hand reached for the necklace around her neck. The Scourge Divine Staff, which symbolized the supreme authority of the Scourge army, was hidden there. At this moment, Nicole's movements paused. Her eyes stared blankly at the sky, and her body trembled violently. Everyone noticed Nicole's abnormality and looked up at the sky at the same time. Their pupils suddenly shrank. Through the faint black fog, a huge black figure appeared in the sky. It had a tall and burly body, with muscles all over its body. There were two huge, mighty horns on its head, and a pair of huge, fleshy wings on its back that flapped gently. Its entire body exuded a terrifying destructive power. The huge demon in the sky stared with its blood-red eyes and coldly scanned the crowd. She licked her lips lightly, and a bloodthirsty expression appeared on her face as if she was looking at a group of prey. Demon, Vitala, an expert of the divine territory. Chapter 650. Through the clouds, Vitala's huge figure floated quietly in the sky. Her upper body was naked, revealing her dark blue skin. The pair of girlish breasts on her chest had turned into two groups of strong muscles, full of violence and ferocity. Behind her, huge black wings flapped gently, like a giant descending from the sky. The corners of her mouth were slightly raised, and there was a trace of contempt in her eyes. What should we do? A huge question mark rose in everyone's heart. Facing Vitala's bright red eyes, they kept retreating, their faces full of fear. At this time, Vitala smiled slightly. She took a deep breath and let out a long roar that shook the heavens and the earth. Boom! A powerful force instantly spread from the sky to the ground. In an instant, All the black fog was swept away, and the scene of the land of death was revealed. Vitala's long roar dispelled the thick fog that had gathered in the land of death for tens of thousands of years. The strength of the divine domain's demons was evident. Ron stared at the sky, clenching his fists. He knew that the other party was coming for Nicole, but what should he do now? The situation was not good. Take her away? Ron looked at Nicole, and suddenly a thought flashed in his mind. He gently gritted his teeth, grabbed Nicole's hand, and flew away. Shea, go! Ron shouted angrily. His figure was not slow at all, and he did not forget to call Shea before leaving. Shea did not dare to be negligent. She waved her hand, and the nightmare beast suddenly appeared like a ghost. It carried Shea on its back, and quickly followed. Don't go, leave the Scourge God's staff. Gibbon was not willing to let the Scourge God's staff fall into the hands of others. He shouted angrily and chased after them. A group of undead flew away from the land of death, leaving behind only the stunned goblins. The goblins recovered and scattered in a hubbub. Ron, we can't run away. Nicole, who was being pulled away by Ron, was now ashen-faced. Her eyes were filled with despair and fear. Don't forget, she is no longer a sacred domain powerhouse of the Naga Sirens. She is now a demon. Keep quiet. Ron used several Shidama skills in one breath without stopping as he said in a low voice, I know I'm no match for her, but I'm confident that I can escape. Nicole fell silent and did not say anything. She only sighed slightly. The actions of the undead on the ground naturally could not escape Vitala's eyes. Her demon eyes could see all illusions, including the haze that Ron was using. In the rapidly escaping black fog, Ron's figure appeared and disappeared. You want to leave? Vitala smiled, revealing a row of sharp teeth. Unfortunately, it's too late. At this time, Vitala raised her hand high, and a black ball of light quickly condensed in her hand. Sphere of destruction. Vitara didn't even think about it. The ball of destruction suddenly blasted out. Its target was the leader, Ron. At this time, a huge black shadow quickly covered Ron's head, overshadowing the sun in the sky. Ron, be careful, she's coming. Shea exclaimed. Not good. Quickly dodge. Jibin was shocked. The huge power contained in the black ball of light terrified him. He stopped abruptly. If he was not careful, he would be caught in it. The speed of the ball of destruction was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it had blasted behind Ron. Ron turned his head slightly and looked at the black ball of light. His nerves were tense to the extreme. At this moment, Nicole's face was pale. She closed her eyes in despair. Boom! There was an earth-shattering noise. In an instant, the powerful black force exploded with the bombardment as the center. The earth quaked and the mountains shook. The powerful destructive force tore the ground apart. The mountains began to collapse. Countless boulders weighing several tons were swept up into the sky under the powerful force. Ron. Shea stared with a pair of frightened eyes and exclaimed. She saw Ron being caught in the destructive force with her own eyes. Boom, boom, boom. Under the powerful force of the ball of destruction, the undead were sent flying. Susie summoned the white bone shield to barely protect her body. Jibin was not so lucky. He was swept up into the sky by the powerful destructive force and fell heavily to the ground. The ground that had been bombarded by the destructive force was a mess. The whole ground collapsed. The ground was scorched black. Clouds like mushrooms rose into the sky. A casual attack from a realm of God's demon was actually so terrifying. But what about Ron? At the moment when the ball of destruction exploded, Ron disappeared without a trace. Ron! Shea's heart suddenly jumped. She reined in the horse's head and stared blankly in front of her. Her face revealed an expression of loss. At this time, the dust on the ground was pulled away, revealing a small figure. It was a dusty Ron who had drilled out from the ground. I'm fine. Ron shook his head and shook the dust off his head. At the same time, he pulled Nicole out from under him. At the last moment, he actually dodged it. Shea saw that Ron was fine, and her heart was relieved. But the next moment, her face turned pale, and she screamed. Ron, be careful. Without Shea's reminder, Ron already felt the wind behind his head. A huge shadow flapped its wings and pressed down from the sky. Ron suddenly opened his eyes wide. He looked at the huge figure in front of him in disbelief. There was only one thought in his mind. This guy's speed is so fast. Without time to think, Ron dodged and dodged the fatal blow from the sky. Boom! The huge fist smashed down and sank into the ground, bursting out a lot of smoke and dust. Ron's thin body was suddenly bounced far away. White bone spear. At this moment, Ron gritted his teeth and fought back. He quickly condensed a white bone spear in his hand and pierced it towards Vitala's body. Bang! The piercing was smoother than expected. The white bone spear fiercely pierced Vitala's chest. Unfortunately, it did not hit any vital points. Roar! Vitala was in pain and let out a heart-shaking roar. A powerful destructive force exploded and sent Ron flying. Cough, cough, cough. Ron climbed up pathetically. His body was still not as strong as a warrior's. At this moment, he only felt that his blood was surging. He was dizzy and almost fell down. At this moment, Ron felt his back tighten. He turned around and saw Shea supporting him. "Are you okay?" Shea asked. Her gentle eyes were filled with concern. Ron shook his head, indicating that he was fine. "Roar, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you." At this moment, Vitala roared. She was careless and was injured by Ron. After being implanted with the demon's seed, Vitala was greatly abnormal. She became extremely angry and crazy. At this moment, a powerful black flame burst out from her body. Her destructive force rose sharply again. Chapter 651. Let's go together. Ron reached out to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. His dark eyes revealed a trace of ruthlessness. Since he couldn't escape, then he would fight. Frost Nova. Ron waved the dragon bone staff in his hand. An extremely cold aura condensed on Vitala's body and exploded at the same time. An extremely cold frost energy appeared and heavily injured Vitala. At the same time, it also slowed down Vitala's movements. Death Coil. Shea also joined in the attack. She slashed out with the holy sword in her hand, and a green aura blasted towards Vitala. Boom! 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 Ron and Shea took turns to attack. The two of them surrounded the frozen demon and slashed at it crazily. Necromancy magic was constantly blasted at the other party. At this moment, bloody wounds appeared on Vitala's body. She roared but could not do anything to the two of them. What's going on? All the undead were shocked by the scene in front of them. They could not believe their eyes. She was being suppressed by two experts from the sacred domain. Was this still a demon with the strength of a divine domain? Let's go. Jibin did not expect the demon in front of him to be so weak. He was also tempted. As long as he killed the demon in front of him, the Calamity God staff would be his. Susie did not reply. She used actions to express herself. Abyss Skeletal Dragon. 3 Abyss Skeletal Dragons were summoned by Susie. They roared and pounced towards Vitala. Undead warriors, death knights, necromancers, 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 and other professions attacked together. Ron also summoned 2 Abyss Skeletal Dragons and joined in the attack. Boom! 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 More than 10 Abyss Skeletal Dragons, countless skeleton mages, skeleton warriors, terror knights, and other undead creatures attacked Vitala together with the death knights and other necromancers. The power of the soul was crazily released. Countless undead creatures were summoned and charged like an army. For a moment, the land of death was abnormally lively. Bone Cage. Grand Magus Necromancer Susie's eyes had already turned dark green. Seeing that the newly thawed demon was about to struggle, she immediately summoned a bone cage and once again trapped Vitara in it, allowing the undead army to attack crazily. Vitala roared again and again. Her huge body was trapped by the white bone cage. She kept struggling and wailing. "Ha ha ha, kill her!" Jibin's two-handed sword drew a long bloody wound on the demon's back, and he laughed wildly. "Is this still a demon? Ha ha, too weak. I didn't expect to be able to kill a demon. This is something worth bragging about. He can't even withstand a single blow. This isn't a demon from the main plane of hell, is it? It has only inherited a portion of the power of destruction. No wonder it's so weak. Die, demon. The undead spoke one after another. Their eyes were filled with excitement. There was nothing to be afraid of when a terrifying demon took off the coat of powerful strength. Hand of Death. Ron saw that it was about time and immediately used the Hand of Death to deal a fatal blow to Vitara. High in the sky, from the dense black fog, a huge black hand stretched out, bringing with it a cold and despairing aura. The aura of death quietly descended. Hand of Death. Hand of Death. All the undead recognized this aura of death. This was a powerful force that was different from the necromancy. Once it appeared, it caused the world to tremble. How is this possible? He also practiced the Book of Death. Gibbon gnashed his teeth and said, "Looks like this guy's talent can't be underestimated." Susie's expression was grave, but she didn't relax in the slightest against the demon's attack. This guy is dead for sure. All the undead looked at Vitara, who was trapped in the bone cage, with a gloating look on their faces. Roar! The crazy Vitara had just broken free from Susie's bone cage. Immediately after, she met the huge black hand that connected the sky and the earth. Boom! Vitara pushed with both hands and fiercely resisted the huge Hand of Death. The black flames on her body burned brighter, and her whole person became more bloodthirsty and crazy. What? She actually resisted the Hand of Death? Susie was shocked. Her strength was about the same as Ron's. Naturally, she also practiced the Hand of Death and knew its power. Seeing that the Hand of Death couldn't do anything to Vitara, she was very surprised. Vitara resisted the Hand of Death and kept roaring. The muscles on her body doubled in size, and her huge wings kept flapping, stirring up a lot of dust. Ron, you have to do your best. Nicole put her hands together and secretly prayed in her heart. Shea also stopped her attack, a trace of worry on her face. On one side was the death energy of the undead, and on the other side was the destruction energy from hell. The two forces constantly pulled and resisted, causing everyone's heart to jump to their throats. Damn it! Several times his strength was bounced back, and Ron was really angry. He growled, and his eyes turned dark green. The Hand of Death suddenly doubled in strength, causing Vitara to retreat a few steps. He used soul ignition? Susie's body trembled, and her eyes were filled with disbelief. This guy's going all out. Gibbon, who was beside Susie, said in a deep voice. He grinned. This is good too. After they fight to the death, the Calamity God's staff will be mine. He paused and glanced at Susie. Seeing that she was unhappy, he quickly added, Wrong, it's ours. Susie sighed slightly and didn't take Gibbon's words to heart. She looked at Ron with a complicated expression, wondering if she would have the courage to use soul ignition if she was in his position. Death and destruction. The two forces were still resisting each other. Ron used soul ignition, but it didn't cause Vitara to collapse. For some reason, Ron faintly felt that something was wrong. All of this was too abnormal. Even the weakest God Realm expert was much stronger than a Sanctuary Realm expert. When a Sanctuary Realm expert could firmly suppress a God Realm expert, it meant that the other party was hiding his strength. Ron vaguely understood this point, but it was too late. At this moment, Vitara's face revealed a sinister smile. The game is over, Vitara said slowly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear. Vitara suddenly exerted force, and the black flames on her body suddenly burst out, constantly spreading in all directions. The blazing heat burned fiercely. Vitara shouted loudly and separated her arms. With a loud bang, the huge Hand of Death that connected the sky was suddenly torn apart. The powerful Hand of Death collapsed, and Ron also suffered from the backlash of his soul power. His body leaned back, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His body fell straight down like a kite with a broken string. Ron, Shea stared blankly, and only recovered after a long time. She let out a sorrowful cry. How is this possible? Everyone was stunned by the sudden turn of events. No one expected that the originally evenly matched two sides would have such a shocking reversal. In an instant, the demon shattered Ron's powerful death energy. Roar! Vitara, who broke free, let out a roar that shook the soul. The black flames on her body burned fiercely, and the destructive power was like a mountain erupting. Ron, are you all right? Shea quickly ran over and helped the heavily injured Ron up. Hurry up and leave. At this moment, Ron's face was as white as paper. He forced his eyes open, looked at Shea, and said with difficulty, "That girl has been playing with us. She hid her strength." As Ron spoke, Vitara began to go crazy. The wings on her back flapped, and her huge body rushed out like a heavy tank. She raised her huge fist and punched forward. The destructive power tore the space apart. At this moment, there was a scream. A Death Knight was hit by the demon's fist, and his hard body was blasted into two. Kill! 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 Vitara, who broke free, was filled with killing intent. At this moment, she was like a demon through and through, constantly killing the weak undead. Help! Don't kill me! Run! The undead finally understood and ran for their lives. However, how could they escape from Vitara's hands? The demon's speed was extremely fast. In a flash, she appeared in front of them, leaving them with nowhere to run. A young female necromancer could not dodge in time and was caught by Vitara. She was held in her hand, raised high, and slammed to the ground. Then Vitara stepped on her. The female necromancer was also a powerhouse of the sacred domain. She did not even have time to scream before she was stomped into meat paste. The powerful destructive power turned into burning flames, burning her body and even her soul to ashes, violent, bloodthirsty, powerful. This was a demon. As killing machines, these powerful demons would only bring destruction and destruction wherever they went. Jibin's hands and feet were cold. His eyes were wide open. The female necromancer was his most capable subordinate. On a certain night that Susie did not know, he had once vented his endless lust on her body. However, Jibin could only watch as she died. He wanted to save her, but he found that he could not move at all. In front of the demon, Jibin did not even have the courage to move. Only endless cowardice was left. Compared to Jibin, Susie was better. She shouted and commanded the abyss skeletal dragon to attack. Boom! Vitara punched again, and a Terror Knight's head was penetrated by the powerful fist. It scattered like a skeleton, and its soul was turned to ashes. Whether it was the Terror Knights, the skeleton warriors, the skeleton mages, or even the most powerful abyss skeletal dragon, they were all vulnerable in front of the demon with the power of the divine domain. Just the flames with the power of destruction were enough to burn some weak, undead creatures into ashes. Susie's face was as pale as snow. More than half of the undead she summoned had been killed. Soon, it would be her turn as a necromancer. Plop! Jibin suddenly knelt down. He weakly raised his head and looked at the huge black figure of the demon. There was no fighting spirit in his eyes, only endless sorrow and despair. It's useless. Jibin's body trembled violently as he muttered. Undead. It's impossible to fight those demons. It's impossible. Jibin weakly closed his eyes. Facing the approaching demon, there was only fear and despair on his face. I'm still too naive. Chapter 652. Be careful. At this time, Susie's voice sounded in Jibin's ears. He looked up and found that the huge demon was already standing in front of him, its ferocious face full of murderous intent. Jibin took a step back in horror. In the face of a powerful demon, the only thought in his mind was to run, but he found that his body could not move. His heart was trembling, and so was his hand that was holding the sword. Then, with a clang, the sword in his hand that was emitting the light of a saint artifact fell to the ground, making a crisp sound. Jibin's face was ashen. At this time, he had completely lost the will to resist. At this time, The huge demon had already raised its fist high and smashed it down on the defenseless G-Bin. Boom! The huge fist smashed down, and the earth trembled violently. A large pit appeared on the ground, and smoke filled the air, but G-Bin was nowhere to be seen. The one who saved G-Bin was none other than Shea. She casually threw G-Bin to the ground like a sandbag. At this time, G-Bin seemed to have lost his soul. He neither expressed thanks nor gratitude for Shea's actions. "I still overestimated you." Shea glanced at him and said lightly, "I didn't expect the strong undead to be so weak. You don't understand?" G-Bin turned his head, not daring to meet Shea's mocking eyes. "You have never lived in the undead main plane, maybe." Shea also turned her face away. "For me, living in the undead main plane is not something to be envious of." After saying that, she turned her horse and disappeared from G-Bin's sight. The battle between the demon and the undead had reached its climax. The undead had done their best, but they were no match for the demon. Except for the abyss skeletal dragon, all the undead creatures were killed by the terrifying demon as soon as they were summoned. The undead could not hold on for much longer. Susie finally could not hold on and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her soul power had been pushed to the limit. "Susie, Miss Susie." Susie's injury caused the subordinates to cry out in alarm. They abandoned the battle and gathered around. "Don't bother about me." Susie wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and pushed the person away. He said hurriedly, "Quick, quick, go and save Nico. Calamity God's staff must not fall into the hands of the demons." At this time, Vitala's blood-red eyes finally locked onto Nicole. From the beginning to the end, she had not forgotten the mission given to her by Hell. Obtain the Calamity God staff. Vitala grinned and approached Nicole step by step. "You, don't come over." Nicole was scared out of her wits. Her small body trembled as she retreated. In front of the powerful demon, she was like a pitiful chick. Vitala was filled with violence and bloodthirst. Her mind had been eroded by the devil's seed, and she had lost her basic rationality and the ability to talk. All that was left was murderous intent. Kill, kill, kill. After defeating a group of undead, Vitala's killing intent rose to its peak. At this time, she was an out-and-out killing machine. Fist of destruction. Vitali didn't even bother interrogating Nicole. Instead, he threw a punch at her. "It's over." Nicole sighed in her heart. She knew that she couldn't avoid it. She closed her eyes tightly. Undead Overture, Death Elegy. At this time, Nicole heard a familiar voice. This voice had the power to calm people's hearts. The wind and clouds between heaven and earth suddenly changed. An earth-shaking aura of death suddenly erupted. The world was filled with the smell of despair. Like the sound of nature, the melodious music filled the entire battlefield. This is Susie's body trembled. A trace of joy that hadn't appeared in a long time appeared on her face. The 4th chapter of the Book of Death, Death Elegy. At this moment, Ron raised the dragon bone staff high up and waved it wildly. A powerful death energy filled the entire space, causing countless creatures to tremble. Like black stones, hard blocks were spread out, forming a hardened ground. The death energy continued to spread. Ka, ka, ka. The hardened black earth trembled, and countless undead creatures scrambled out of the ground. The skeleton warrior stood up. The skeleton magus stood up. The Terror Knight stood up. The ghouls stood up. The powerful abyssal bone dragon and the numerous gargoyles roamed the sky. An army of several tens of thousands of undead suddenly appeared, covering the small hill. Countless white skeletons continuously surged. Their deep eye sockets were scarlet red as they let out heart-shaking roars. My injuries. At this time, Susie discovered that her injuries had miraculously healed. Apart from her, all the injured undead had been healed. Undead Overture, an eternal war song. Ron stopped playing and coldly raised his head. His eyes were emotionless. His body emitted a powerful and frightening death energy. At this moment, Ron waved his hand and softly said, "Kill, roar." Several tens of thousands of undead simultaneously let out a roar that pierced the sky. Then, the earth shook as all the undead charged at Vitala. Their momentum was great, shaking the entire world. Vitala was abnormally calm in the face of the undead. She coldly snorted and gently moved her right hand, raising a finger. Cloak! A wisp of black flame appeared on her fingertip, gently jumping like a mischievous elf. A strange smile appeared on Vitala's face. At this time, her eyes shone brightly. Her fingers suddenly drew a line, and the destructive power on her body burst out like a mountain. Destruction of heaven and earth. In an instant, time and space seemed to have stopped. Between heaven and earth, only a dazzling light was left. Boom! The boundless black flame surged up like a surging river, splashing up waves more than 10 feet high. The huge flame wave continued to pour down, destroying everything in its path. What? Ron was completely stunned. His eyes widened. The tyrannical power in front of him made him feel that he could not contend with it. For the first time, he truly felt the gap between him and his opponent. It was the gap between heaven and earth, the true power of a powerhouse in the realm of the gods. Vitala, who had transformed into a demon, had a powerful destructive power. Her strength even surpassed the strongest fairy dragon in the Noah continent. The powerful destructive power could destroy heaven and earth, sweeping through everything. In the roar like a huge wave hitting a reef, tens of thousands of undead were swallowed up by the black flame in an instant. They did not even have the chance to struggle or howl before they were burned to ashes by the powerful black flame. How could this be? Susie, who originally had a glimmer of hope for Ron, was now in complete despair. Her eyes widened in shock, and her body trembled violently due to fear. This was just a demon, but she had such strength. What about the thousands of demons in hell? Susie did not dare to think about it. For the first time, she truly felt the horror of hell. Defeated. We're finished. Ron's mind was blank. His body was sent flying by the black flame wave. He floated quietly in the air and fell heavily to the ground, but it was as if he did not feel anything. He could finally understand Gibbon's despair. It was a feeling that was so powerful that it was suffocating. Sure enough, it's still not enough. Gibbon murmured. I knew it. It's impossible to win. It's impossible. Facing a demon, a powerhouse from the sacred domain with destructive power, a group of powerhouses from the sacred domain had no chance of winning. Even if their strength had reached the peak of the sacred domain and was only a thin line away from a powerhouse from the sacred domain. But that thin line was the gap between heaven and earth. Clang, clang. After the powerful destruction wreaked havoc, the entire death impasse was no longer in its original state. The only remaining ruins had completely disappeared. The ground was scorched black, and a fiery red color could be seen on the ground that had been burned to ashes. Dead, all dead. All the undead creatures were burned to ashes. Even the powerful abyss bone dragon was no exception. Encountering the powerful Vitala, their appearance was destined to be a tragedy. There were also many goblins who were burned to death. They hid underground and were roasted alive by the black flame. In that blow, all the undead were swept in, including Susie, Gibbon, and Shea. At this moment, everyone was injured. Those who were weaker died on the spot. The demon Vitala flapped a pair of black wings on her back and slowly descended. Looking at everything that was destroyed in front of her, a satisfied smile appeared on her face. Resistance was futile. The power of a demon was unparalleled. At this moment, Vitala was completely controlled by the demon's seed. She had turned into a violent, bloodthirsty demon. Only destruction and slaughter could make her happy. Vitala looked at Ron and then at Susie. She smiled contemptuously. She turned her head, and her gaze finally fell on Nicole. Hand it over, Vitala spoke slowly. Due to the gradual loss of consciousness, her language ability and thinking were limited. She could only speak a few simple syllables. Nicole was stared at by the demon's eyes. She seemed to be unable to move and trembled in fear. Nicole, At this moment, Ron's voice came from not far away. He struggled to get up but fell heavily to the ground. Seeing this scene, Susie and Gibbon shed tears of regret. They knew what it meant to hand over the Calamity God staff. Unfortunately, they had done their best. Vitala frowned. She looked at Ron contemptuously and then looked away. To her, these people's strength could not threaten her at all. Death was a matter of time. She did not care at all. Do you want to die? Seeing that Nicole did not move, Vitala finally became impatient. She took a step forward, her eyes full of murderous intent. I'll take. You don't come over. Nicole seemed to be frightened. Her trembling hand reached for the necklace on her neck. Seeing that Nicole was willing to cooperate, Vitala stopped. Hand over your life? Vitala's voice was intermittent, but everyone understood what she meant. However, they also knew that this condition was limited to Nicole and did not include them. The undead were in complete despair. The Calamity God staff, the symbol of the highest power in the Scourge army, would eventually fall into the hands of Hell. The demons of Hell who had the Calamity God staff could play with the billions of undead in the undead world in the palm of their hands. Nicole opened the mechanism of the necklace and used her spiritual sense to connect with the Calamity God staff. Chapter 653. What Nicole touched was the corpse of a small, cat-like creature. A dimensional beast. Legend had it that the corpse of a dimensional beast could allow one to comprehend the mysteries of space and directly move to another dimension. However, legends were legends after all. No one knew if the corpse of a dimensional beast really had such an effect. But Nicole knew. Although Nicole did not comprehend the mysteries of space, she knew that the dimensional beast had something that could teleport. That was its magic core. The mysteries of space were all hidden in the dimensional beast's magic core. The dimensional beast could teleport multiple times, but unfortunately, a dead dimensional beast's magic core could only be used once. Once was enough for Nicole. Nicole used her sharp nails to cut open the dimensional beast's head and carefully dug out the small magic core. She held it in her hand. Hurry up! Vitala was already impatient. She urged, and the black flames on her body suddenly exploded. Almost done. Nicole used her words to calm the demon while secretly injecting energy into the dimensional beast's magic core. Calamity God's staff. Ron's heart was already close to despair. The scene that he did not want to see the most had finally happened. The Calamity God staff that symbolized the highest authority in the Calamity army was about to fall into the hands of the Hell demon. However, it will be the same for anyone else. No one could resist all of this. Vitala's strength was just too strong. The Calamity God staff was about to be in her hands. Vitala's face revealed a smile, but her demonic face became even more sinister. At this moment, Nicole was already prepared. She took a deep breath, and her gaze turned cold. For you. As she spoke, Nicole threw something out. It was an antique wooden box that was half the height of a person. The wooden box tumbled in the air and flew towards Vitala in a parabola. Vitala was overjoyed. She flapped her wings, and her huge body suddenly rushed out, bringing with it a powerful wave of air. In the blink of an eye, Vitala had already rushed to the front of the wooden box. Before the box landed, she stretched out her thick hands and grabbed it. Gotcha! The hard wooden box was like a fragile egg in Vitala's hand. It was broken, and the items inside the wooden box suddenly burst out. Vitala was stunned. Ron was stunned. Everyone was stunned. It was shiny and black. No one would have thought that the small box didn't contain the Calamity Divine Staff, but countless black crystal coins. Thousands of black crystal coins fell to the ground with crisp sounds like mercury spilling onto the ground. Even the brutal demon Vitala had a greedy look in her eyes when she saw the huge wealth in front of her. It was this greed that made her hesitate in her actions. Now, at this time, Nicole gritted her teeth and suddenly took out the alien beast's magic core. She raised it high and crushed it. Boom! The demonic core that was as fragile as glass shattered. Countless powders turned into ice shards and scattered down. Immediately after, A gentle light appeared and enveloped Nicole's entire body, turning it into a halo. Town return scroll. All of the undead were stupefied. They never imagined that Nicole would actually have such an idea. Their faces lit up with joy, but very quickly their hearts sank. A return scroll was simply useless in front of a powerhouse of the realm of the gods. Spatial imprisonment. Vitala's reaction was extremely fast. At this moment, she immediately opened her domain. A powerful god's domain power erupted. Black flames spread out like a wave, sealing the surrounding space. However, Nicole's spatial energy wasn't affected at all. The light of her spatial energy grew brighter and brighter. She was about to teleport. How can this be? How can this be? Vitala's heart was roaring. She never thought that her powerful destruction domain wouldn't be able to seal the opponent's spatial energy. The situation had changed far beyond her expectations. No, this isn't a town return scroll. This is a space heart. This is a space heart refined from an alien beast's magic core. Susie cried out involuntarily. The so-called space heart was another name for the alien beast's magic core. Damn it, how could she have such a thing? Gibbon said through gritted teeth. However, at this moment, his heart was inexplicably relieved. No matter what, the Calamity God staff wouldn't fall into the hands of the infernal demons. Ron was lying on the ground, his black robe covered in blood. Seeing this scene, a gratified smile appeared on his blood-stained face. Great, Nicole, you did well. Shea leaned half of her body against the wall, her eyes filled with tears of excitement. Nicole, who was shrouded in spatial energy, was filled with a divine aura. At this moment, she was like a savior in everyone's eyes. Vitala was stunned. Everything that happened in front of her was far beyond her expectations. Nicole's pair of beautiful eyes swept across the huge demon, then fixed on Ron. She slowly opened her mouth. Ron, Shea, thank you very much for accompanying me here and fulfilling one of my wishes, Nicole said and bowed slightly. But now I'm sorry. I have to leave because Nicole paused and straightened her back, her gaze resolute as she looked forward. I have a more important mission. The Calamity God staff must not fall into the hands of the infernal demons because it will bring disaster to the entire undead main plane. Ron looked at Nicole with a complicated expression. Nicole looked at Susie and Gibbon and said, Sister, brother-in-law, please forgive me for not being able to hand the Calamity God staff over to you. Before my father left, he told me that the Calamity God staff must be handed over to a peerless expert who cultivates in the power of the undead. Only he can lead the Calamity army to rise again and regain its glory. After Nicole said this, the surrounding halo and the spatial energy spiraling around her weakened. The teleportation to another plane had entered its final stage. At this moment, Vitala was already anxious. She did not expect that she would be tricked at the last moment. At this moment, the wings on her back flapped violently, and the black flames on her huge fists burned brightly. One could vaguely see purple lightning flowing through them. Die! Vitala roared and pounced forward. She raised her fist high and punched at Nicole with all her might. Nicole's lips curled into a bitter smile. She knew that if she left now and left everyone behind, it would be very unkind. But Nicole had no choice because she had a more important mission. This mission was to find a peerless expert to be the true successor of the Calamity Army in the undead main plane to regain its glory. Then, my friends, goodbye. After Nicole finished speaking, she bowed deeply. At the same time, Vitala's fist with black flames had already arrived. At this moment, the halo on Nicole's body shone brightly, illuminating the surrounding space. With a swoosh, just as Vitala's fist was about to hit Nicole, her figure disappeared along with the light. Boom! 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 Vitala's attack missed, and the powerful destructive force hit the small mountain behind her. The earth trembled and the mountain shook. Wherever the light passed, half of the mountain was flattened. In an instant, the entire place was silent. Everyone was stunned. Chapter 654. Nicole left with an even more important mission. In fact, she knew that there was no use in staying here. She would only be a burden to everyone. In the end, she still had to hand over the Calamity God staff. Although Ron and the others understood this, they could not accept it emotionally. Ron's gaze fell on Vitala. Vitala was still in an attacking posture, but her huge body was trembling nonstop. Her face was distorted, and her blood-red eyes were overflowing with killing intent. It was obvious that she was extremely angry. In front of the furious demon, no one dared to breathe loudly, afraid that they would be targeted by the demon. Sure enough, Vitala let out a despairing howl. The howl was filled with extreme anger and unwillingness. Immediately after, a powerful black flame burst out from her body. The battlefield that had already calmed down was once again stirred up by a strong whirlwind. The howl shook the sky, and a powerful destructive force pierced through the sky. At this moment, Vitala had exploded. She punched out, and a powerful destructive force broke through the sky. It directly bombarded a small mountain not far away, causing a powerful explosion. Boom! 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 Vitala punched out again and again. The black flame on her body flourished, and a powerful destructive force wantonly destroyed everything in its path. Everywhere it went, everything was turned into ruins. Countless rocks rolled down, and several tons of boulders were swept into the air. In her rage, Vitala caused great damage to this uninhabited land of death. At this moment, Vitala's heart was filled with extreme anger and unwillingness. The Calamity God staff was once about to fall into her hands, but in the end, it was all for naught. How could she not be angry? She was venting the surging anger in her heart. The entire land of death was turned upside down by her. Ron, Shea, Jibin, Susie, and the others trembled under Vitala's terrifying power. A violent demon was so terrifying. Be careful! At this time, Ron shouted and pulled Susie. At the same time, a huge boulder weighing dozens of tons fell at their feet with a bang. At the critical moment, Ron gave up the idea of going against her. Regardless of his serious injuries, he saved Susie's life. Now, he was on the same side as Susie and Jibin. In any case, they were undead. Thank you. Susie was still in shock. Seeing that it was Ron, she was a little surprised, but she still politely thanked him. Nothing. Ron forced a smile. At this time, Shea also limped over. Although her injuries had already recovered, she couldn't replenish the soul force she had consumed. Shea stared at the rampaging demon in the distance and sighed. This guy is crazy. Then let's run, Susie said nervously. Although the undead focused on the cultivation of the soul, even if the physical body was destroyed, they could use the soul to be reborn. But Susie knew that against an opponent of Vitala's level, she could definitely destroy her body and soul. Ron smiled bitterly. Can we still escape? As if feeling the despair in Ron and the others' hearts, Vitala stopped and turned around. Her blood-red eyes stared at them fiercely. I'm going to kill you. The furious Vitala looked at Ron and the others with a strong, killing intent in her eyes. She spat out a vague sentence. She wanted to vent all the anger in her heart on those undead. Ron looked at Vitala's blood-red eyes, and his heart gradually sank. He knew that he couldn't pass this hurdle in front of him. In the face of this hopeless gap in strength, the only thing they could do was close their eyes. At this time, the wings on Vitala's back suddenly opened. With a strong wind, she rushed toward Ron and the others. Whitebone shield. Absolute defense. Ron, Susie, and Shea shouted in unison. They raised their last resistance, although they knew in their hearts that resistance was futile. Boom! Sure enough, under the powerful strength of the demon Vitala, the shields that the three of them condensed with soul power exploded. They flew up like kites with broken strings and fell heavily to the ground. Kill you! Vitala's huge body kept stepping down, and a lot of smoke rose from her body. Under her feet was Ron's thin and weak body. Ron, who was being trampled under the demon's feet, was completely unrecognizable. All the bones in his body exploded like fireworks, and he couldn't even let out a cry. At this moment, the furious Vitala was staring at Ron. Nicole ran away, so she vented all her anger on Ron. Shea was anxious. She didn't care about the gap between her and the demon. She roared and rushed forward. Susie also began to summon the strongest abyssal bone dragon. "Get out of my way," Vitala shouted, and the flames on her body exploded. Shea screamed and was sent flying. At the same time, she attacked the two abyssal bone dragons summoned by Susie. "No, we can win. No, win." Jibin was trembling all over. He looked at everything in front of him in horror, and his teeth were chattering because of fear. "Unless I summon a frost dragon, I can still fight." The abyssal skeletal dragon is too weak, as if to prove Gibbon's words. In just a moment, the two abyssal bone dragons exploded under Vitala's fist. Vitala, with her strength in the divine realm, was like an unstoppable war chariot. She was invincible. It's over. The atmosphere of death hung over everyone's head. Everyone's heart was filled with despair. Ron, what happened to you?" The seriously injured Shea got up with difficulty and quickly crawled to Ron's side. Looking at Ron's miserable state, she couldn't help but cry. At this moment, all the bones in Ron's body were shattered. He could only breathe. His body was also trampled into the ground by the huge demon. He couldn't move at all. Hearing Shea's voice, the seriously injured Ron forced his eyes open. His swollen face revealed a desperate smile. "Shea, yeah, maybe I'm going to die," Ron said with difficulty. "But today, I'm very happy, although I still don't know what happened." But the Calamity God staff was taken away. It didn't fall into the hands of the demons. As for Nicole, he took a deep breath, paused for a moment, and then continued. "You must not blame her. Blame her? Is it still useful?" Hearing this, Shea smiled sadly. "If I knew that things would turn out like this, I would have killed her earlier. What Calamity God staff? What Lich King? What Calamity army of the main plane of the dead? They have nothing to do with me. I don't care about them. In my heart, there's only you." As Shea spoke, she looked at the seriously injured Ron. Her red eyes were filled with tenderness. "Ron, do you think if you die, I'll still be alive? Don't forget, we've already made a contract in front of God." Shea paused for a moment and smiled slightly. Chapter 655. Ron's eyes regained a trace of life. Shea knew that it was the final radiance of the setting sun. Ron forced a smile as black blood flowed down from the corner of his mouth. "Shea, actually, you haven't changed at all. You're just being cold to me on purpose." Shea's face turned red. "You already know?" Ron nodded with difficulty. At this moment, Ron felt a warmth at the corner of his mouth. Shea gently kissed Ron's cold lips at this moment. The two of them kissed passionately, as if they were the only existence in the world. After a while, their lips reluctantly parted. Shea smiled embarrassedly and lowered her voice. "But it's a pity that we're both going to die." "Are we going to die?" Ron sighed in his heart. He didn't expect that he didn't die in the Noah continent, but in another plane, a place called the Snow Orchid continent. At this moment, Ron thought of Aurora, Kadena, Becerra, and D-Lin. Perhaps, if he really died, they would be very sad. Thinking of death, Ron felt a sense of relief. Anyway, he tried his best. If he died, then so be it. At this moment, the demon Vitala's blood-red eyes stared at Susie, the necromancer, sacred magus who still had a certain amount of fighting power. "You, don't come over." At this moment, all of Susie's abyss bone dragons were destroyed. She was alone, seeing the demon approaching step by step. Her face turned pale, and she retreated in fear. The demon, smiled. His sinister face became more and more terrifying. His huge wings flapped, and his body rushed forward like a phantom. In just a moment, he rushed in front of Susie and grabbed her like a chicken. "You, let go of me." Susie struggled desperately in the demon's hands, but couldn't break free from the demon's big hands. At this moment, her beautiful face turned purple. Shrouded by the shadow of death, her body trembled with fear. Susie, Ron and Shea also noticed this and cried out in alarm. Unfortunately, they were too heavily injured to do anything. You undead. Demon Vitala's breathing became heavy, and her blood-red eyes were filled with brutality. She grinned, revealing 2 pairs of sharp canine teeth. They all deserve to die, Vitala roared. At this moment she moved. Her thick claws slowly rose and grabbed Susie's delicate arm. She exerted a little force. Ah! Susie let out a heart-wrenching scream, the sharp sound echoing in the land of death. Her arm had been torn off, and the white bones of her broken left arm could be seen. Susie almost fainted from the pain. Although the undead cultivated their own souls, the pain from the physical body was still unbearable. With a plop sound, the lotus-like snow-white hand was thrown to the ground. The overflowing blood dyed the ground red. Vitala smiled with satisfaction. She did the same and tore off Susie's right arm, followed by the pair of beautiful and slender thighs. Ron lay on the ground and watched this cruel and brutal scene. At this moment, his eyes were blood-red, his nails had sunk deep into his flesh, and his body trembled violently with anger. Demon! Shea also gritted her teeth. She couldn't wait to rush up and tear the cruel and brutal demon into pieces. If she could still move her body, this terrifying demon was no longer simply killing, but seeking the pleasure of tyranny in killing. The demon seed had deeply integrated with Vitala and was gradually devouring her mind. At this moment, she was no longer under control and had become a powerful and cruel monster. If the noble and beautiful Princess Vitala of the Sea Tribe could see her now, she would definitely regret swallowing the demon seed. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in the world. After a while, Susie's hands and feet were broken, and the empty necromancer robe hung powerlessly under her body, constantly fluttering in the wind. At this moment, she couldn't even speak. Her body was twitching, and her blue lips kept trembling like a broken doll. At this time, Susie groaned. Her broken body was thrown to the ground by the demon, like a wriggling mass of meat. The land of death was full of a sad atmosphere. The demon's scarlet eyes kept sweeping around. The survivors lowered their heads, shivering, and dared not look at her. Demon Vitala looked at her masterpiece on the ground and smiled with satisfaction. At this time, she took a step forward and stepped on Susie's broken body with her huge foot. Susie let out a weak groan. She struggled a few times and closed her eyes in resignation. Just as Vitala was about to end Susie's life, her heart suddenly trembled, and she quickly turned around. With a loud bang, a powerful soul force erupted. Who dared to make a move under the demon's power? The faint black fog dispersed, revealing the figure inside. The figure inside the black fog was clad in white bone armor. He held a shiny two-handed sword in his hand. Clearly, it was a sacred artifact. A pair of huge bone wings spread out from his back like a bone dragon, occupying more than half of his body. Ron and Shea were stunned. It was none other than the necromancer's sword Saint Gibbon, who had the strength of the peak of the sacred domain. At this moment, he was holding the two-handed sword tightly and slashing at the demon's arm, but he found that he couldn't cut it at all. Gibbon floated in the air, and his face was filled with intense fear. His body kept trembling. Seeing that his wife was about to die at the hands of the demon, he rushed forward without hesitation. When Gibbon stood in front of the demon, he realized how stupid he was. The difference in strength between the two couldn't be measured at all. In the eyes of the demon, he was like a defenseless child. "Haha, you coward. You actually dare to attack me?" Demon Vitala sneered and slowly turned around. At this moment, her eyebrows twitched, and a bone-chilling cold aura was emitted from her body. "If you don't resist, you won't die. Why don't you weaklings understand?" Vitala roared angrily. His huge fist was covered in black flames as he suddenly struck out and hit Gibbon's soft stomach with a bang. Gibbon bent down in pain. He raised his head, and in the next moment, he saw something even more terrifying. Destruction Flame, The black destruction flame wrapped around Gibbon's body like a snake. At this moment, he was burning like a man on fire. The destruction flame burned Gibbon until he rolled on the ground and screamed. He wanted to extinguish the black flames on his body, but unfortunately, his actions were futile. The black flames seemed to have magic. Once he touched them, he could not get rid of them. Susie's physical body was injured, but the destruction flame also burned his soul. Gibbon's screams echoed throughout the battlefield. It was a scream from the depths of his soul. The burned muscles sizzled, and the air was filled with the pungent smell of meat. The pitiful goblin boy was lucky to survive under the demon's powerful attack. At this moment, he buried his head deep in the goblin prophet's arms, revealing an extremely terrified gaze. "Grandpa Prophet, what should we do?" The goblin boy's voice was sobbing. The demon's attack just now was like a catastrophe. His parents were blown to ashes in an instant, and they did not even have time to scream. "I don't know, child." The old goblin prophet hugged the little boy tightly. His wrinkled face was full of tears. "But I believe that the great God will protect us. Definitely. Let us pray," the goblin prophet said in despair. At this moment, he seemed to have aged more than 10 years as the prophet of the goblins. This was the first time he had entrusted his life to fate. The demon laughed loudly. Her laughter was filled with cruelty. At this moment, she licked her lips lightly and looked for her next target. Soon, Vitala's gaze fell on Ron, who was trapped in the pit, and she smiled coldly. "Not good." Ron's heart trembled, and his heart sank. Pung! Vitala's body turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared. The next moment, she appeared in front of Ron. So fast, Ron was dumbfounded. Looking at the huge figure in front of him, he realized in horror that the demon in front of him was stronger than before. Her strength has increased tremendously. "Damn it, how can I live?" Ron gritted his teeth as he thought. The demon Vitala looked quietly at Ron, who was lying in the pit, and laughed coldly. Ron raised his head with difficulty and looked at her calmly. His eyes shone with determination. "That's right, it's you." The demon Vitala laughed. "I remember now. You're the one who ruined my plans time and time again. You're the one who prevented me from obtaining the calamity divine staff time and time again, making me unable to answer to Her Highness." The demon's tone gradually rose, and it was obvious that she was angry. At this moment, her speech had become more nimble, and her strength had increased. This meant that the demon seed had completely merged with Vitala, and there was no distinction between them. I'll fight it out with you." Seeing that the demon was about to attack Ron, Shea gritted her teeth and gathered her remaining strength. She grabbed the holy sword beside her and rushed over. She roared, and the sharp sword in her hand was full of flames. Looking at Shea rushing over, the demon Vitala's eyes flashed with contempt. She snorted coldly. "Get lost!" Vitala sent a flying kick at Shea, sending him flying far away. The other surviving undead looked at all this in horror. No one dared to step forward and intervene. Even their breathing became extremely light, for fear that they would accidentally attract the demon's attention. Shea rolled several times and fell heavily to the ground. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of black blood. She wanted to get up, but she fell far away. Shea raised her head. In an instant, her eyes widened. No! She saw Ron's broken body slowly rising in the demon's hands. She could even see the demon's grin. Perhaps he had experienced a lot of storms, or perhaps he had predicted his ending early on. Ron, who was mentally prepared, was always calm. "Very good attitude." The demon Vitala smiled. "Compared with that coward, your strength and courage are much better. What do you want?" Ron asked slowly. His eyes never left the demon's ferocious and terrifying face. "I want to tell you, this game is over," Vitala said with a smile. "In the name of the god of destruction, I declare your death sentence." After the demon finished speaking, she roared like a beast. She swung her hand in a semicircle and threw Ron into the air. Ron's body was like a kite with a broken string, floating unconsciously. At this time, He clearly felt that a powerful destructive force was rapidly condensing on the demon's body. Ball of destruction. Vitala bent her 10 fingers into claws. Black gas quickly condensed and turned into a ball. The black ball, which was the size of a basketball, spun in Vitala's hand. Purple lightning constantly swam around the ball. Go to hell. Vitala roared and attacked Ron, who was constantly falling from the sky. The ball of destruction left a series of tracks in the air. The hot ball even burned the air. Ron's body fell. Below him was a broken wall. On the wall, a strange pattern was engraved. That was the Scourge's blood skull flag. Even after thousands of years, there was still no trace of it. The blood-red pattern was like a flame that was constantly jumping. No one noticed that the entire land of death had been destroyed by the demon. The surrounding area had been wiped out by the destructive force, including the entire temple. Only this broken wall still existed. It stood proudly like a monument with an unyielding will. Ron, Shea, stood up and howled in despair, like an injured she-wolf in the night. Feeling the temperature in the air getting hotter and hotter, Ron smiled and slowly closed his eyes. At this time, the wall under Ron strangely lit up. And what is this? Ron's heart skipped a beat. At this time, he only felt that his body was surrounded by a warm gas. The soul power in his body began to circulate rapidly. What's going on? Ron opened his eyes in shock. At this time, he felt that his body was no longer in pain. It was as if he had taken a bath. Every pore was filled with comfort. This is the demon Vitala's fierce and cruel eyes opened wide. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. She took a step back in shock and trembled all over. What is this? Inexplicably, she felt a fear from the bottom of her heart. The sky darkened slightly. In the space connecting heaven and earth, a huge human figure appeared. This illusory figure was about a few hundred feet tall. It was many times larger than Vitala's demon body. Compared to this huge figure, the demon Vitala was so small. The huge figure was wearing a wide black robe and a crown symbolizing nobility on its head. It exuded an extraordinary aura. At this time, the huge illusory figure slowly opened its eyes and quietly stared at Vitala. The dark eyes shot out a sharp gaze that pierced into Vitala's heart. Chapter 656. Everyone was stunned as they looked at the giant figure in the air above the land of death. They couldn't suppress the shock on their faces. That giant figure was emitting a boundless aura of death. As if she felt something strange around her, Susie, who had her limbs torn off, opened her eyes and looked curiously at the giant figure. She felt an incomparably familiar aura from that figure. When Susie's gaze fell on the figure's face, her body couldn't help but tremble. Her face was filled with astonishment. "Father, it's the Lich King. Lord Lich King," the undead all cried out in alarm. That's right, the tall and sturdy figure in the air was the commander of the Scourge of the undead plane, the highest ruler, the highest belief, the Lich King, Lord Hermes. Unfortunately, this wasn't Hermes himself, but a reflection in the air. It could be said that this was a trace of his will that he had left behind in the snow orchid continent. Under the Lich King, the undead all knelt down, their faces filled with excitement. Some even began to cry bitterly. In their hearts, the Lich King, Hermes, was a supreme existence. It's the Lich King. It really is the Lich King. The undead sword Saint Jibin lay on the ground, his eyes filled with disbelief. His body was covered in burns, and he looked like he had been fished out from a pile of charcoal. It seemed like he only had one last breath left. So that trace of familiar aura of death belonged to the Lich King. Jibin muttered, "The Lich King really did come here. The Lich King." Ron slowly opened his eyes. Seeing that familiar face, his heart trembled. From that strange dream, and what Lord Noah had said, who else could this man be but the Lich King? Why would the Lich King appear here? A big question mark appeared in Ron's heart. No, it's not Lord Lich King. It's just a wisp of Lord Lich King's soul. However, merely this strand of incomplete soul contained strength that was far beyond imagination. Compared to it, Ron's strength was merely a speck of dust in the vast galaxy. The ball of destruction that Vitara released to attack Ron disappeared without a trace after only one hit. The sudden appearance of the Lich King's broken soul caught the demon Vitala off guard. She still didn't understand what was going on. However, there were some things that she understood. The strength of this gigantic figure in the void was unimaginably powerful. You? What exactly are you? Vitara took a step back and stuttered. Compared to her previous ferocious and ruthless attitude, she was now more cautious. A sigh came from the void. The Lich King's gaze casually swept past the ferocious demon. He didn't stop and immediately looked at Ron. The Lich King's broken soul quietly stared at Ron. He didn't say anything, but a trace of sadness appeared in his deep eyes. Ron's heart trembled. He's looking at me. He's actually looking at me. Seeing that the Lich King was looking at him, Ron couldn't feel happy no matter what. The gaze that shot him was like a sharp sword that pierced into his heart. That gaze clearly contained intense disappointment. Yes, that's right, it was disappointment. It was the feeling of a parent who expected better from their child. Ron felt an indescribable pain in his heart. He didn't know why, but he was deeply hurt by this gaze. This kind of pain was heart-wrenching. Kill her. At this time, a slightly magnetic voice sounded in Ron's mind. This voice contained a dignified aura, as if it was an order that couldn't be questioned. Ron understood that the she was referring to Vitara. Hearing the Lich King's order, Ron couldn't help but shake his head and bitterly smile. Kill Vitara. If he could really kill her, why would he wait until now? At this time, the demon Vitara below began to laugh. Haha, I thought it was something else. It's just the broken soul of a powerhouse. You're actually pretending to be a god? She could already see that the huge reflection in the void was just a broken soul. Kill her. At this time, the Lich King's order sounded in Ron's mind again. This time, his voice carried a trace of urgency and dissatisfaction. My apologies, Lich King. Please forgive me for not being able to do it. Ron honestly replied. She's a powerhouse of the divine realm. I'm not her opponent. Hearing Ron's words, the Lich King fell into a rare silence. He lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he lightly sighed. Vitara's body moved. She slowly opened the demon wings behind her back. The corner of her mouth slightly raised, revealing a trace of an evil smile as her body slowly rose into the air. Perhaps your original body is very powerful. Unfortunately, you're just a broken soul right now. Vitara coldly laughed. She was confident in dealing with a broken soul. The Lich King didn't respond. He didn't even look at the demon. It was as if he didn't care about her at all. He only silently looked at Ron, his eyes filled with worry as he pondered. Ron also calmly looked at the Lich King. He didn't understand why the Lich King had been paying attention to him ever since he appeared. Susie was the Lich King's daughter, but the Lich King didn't even look at her. Father! Susie's face was filled with excitement. At this moment, she wanted nothing more than to fly into her father's arms and cry to her heart's content. Right now, the Scourge's days in the undead main plane were very difficult. Bastard! With a boom, the demon Vitara's body exploded with large amounts of black flames accompanied by purple lightning. The destructive power surged and roared like the waves of the sea. At this moment, the demon Vitara was deeply enraged by the void figure's attitude. She roared, "You dare to ignore my existence. Very well, I'll make you pay the price." After speaking, Vitara's body turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared. This was the demon race's powerful skill, teleport. In the next moment, Vitara had already appeared beside the Lich King. She fiercely punched toward his chest. The powerful destructive power covered the sky and earth, destroying everything. In the land of death below, Shea struggled to stand up. She looked at the figure in the sky and muttered, "Ron, what is he doing?" In the sky above the land of death, Ron's figure silently floated. His consciousness was communicating with the Lich King's incomplete soul. "You're saying you wanted to kill her?" The Lich King didn't say anything. He simply nodded his head. Ron was about to say something when he felt his body move. An unfamiliar power suddenly appeared. This was an extremely vast amount of soul energy. This soul energy was like a broken dam that slowly poured into his mind. At the same time, his body was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. At this moment, Ron felt that his body was surrounded by a warm aura. His mind was incomparably clear. Seeing his body continuously recovering, he looked at his hands in disbelief. His face was filled with joy. "Sir Lich King, Ron didn't have time to react. At this moment, he felt a boom in his mind. A powerful energy once again poured into his mind. This is... Ron was completely shocked. This time, the energy that poured into his mind was none other than the God of Death. It was like a strand of God of Death. It was like a blade of grass that happily jumped in Ron's hand. The God of Death, the legendary power of the God of Death. Ron didn't know how the Lich King had the God of Death. Or was he a legendary god? The God of Death, holding the God of Death in his hand, Ron's face was filled with excitement. At this moment, the Lich King's middle-aged voice once again sounded in his mind. "Go kill her. I don't want to see any other demon." "Yes, Sir Lich King," Ron replied. He slowly raised his head and stared at the ferocious demon. He took a deep breath and slowly raised his arm. Ron raised his arm and made a throwing motion. His eyes revealed a powerful battle intent. God of Death! God of Death! All the undead below were dumbfounded. They looked at Ron with eyes full of respect. The God of Death was the symbol of the supreme God of Death. The black God of Death quickly condensed into the shape of a bone spear. It was different from the usual bone spears. At this moment, the bone spear in Ron's hand was completely black and emitted a vast amount of God of Death. Spear of Death. Ron's eyes focused and firmly locked onto the demon Vitala. He clenched his teeth and threw the Spear of Death. What is this? God of Death? God of Death. When Ron condensed the Spear of Death, Vitala already felt that something was wrong. If her strength was the boundless sea, then the God of Death was the vast galaxy. Vitala never thought that Ron would actually use the God of Death. The huge figure behind him wasn't a god like she had expected, but a real god. The gap between a god and a god was like a chasm. No. Seeing the Spear of Death flying towards her, Vitala was completely flustered. The powerful aura of death sealed the entire space, and a thick haze shrouded the demon Vitala's heart. Fist of Destruction. In the face of the threat of death, Vitala was not willing to sit still and wait for death. She made up her mind and threw a punch at the Spear of Death. With a loud bang, the entire space shook. The power of destruction and the divine power of death, these two powerful forces launched a high-level confrontation at the pinnacle. Not good, Ron. When the undead saw this, they panicked and fled in all directions. The goblins also desperately drilled into the ground. If they were not careful, they would be swallowed by the powerful God of Death. Fortunately, these loyal undead did not forget the seriously injured Gibbon and Susie and rescued them at the last moment. However, in just a breath's time, the winner was decided. The Spear of Death had already pierced deeply into Vitala's body. The power of destruction began to collapse under the powerful attack of the God of Death. Impossible, Vitala shouted loudly and let out a desperate howl. "I'm a demon, the strongest demon, the strongest in the snow orchid continent. How can I die? I won't die. Oh, boom, boom, boom." The demon's huge body burst out with a glaring light. In that moment, the light illuminated the entire sky. The sky changed color, the earth shook, and even the space showed signs of cracking. The power of a god was terrifying. The light exploded again. Following the glaring light, the demon's body turned into countless pieces, decayed, disappeared. Everything turned into nothingness. Boom, boom, boom. After a while, the chaotic space finally calmed down. The entire land of death seemed to have suffered a devastating blow. The huge shadow of the Lich King had disappeared. In the snow orchid continent, the Lich King only left behind a fragment of his soul. It was this fragment of soul that saved Ron and everyone's lives. Ron stood there quietly. The black necromancer's robe on his body fluttered in the wind. His calm face was filled with indifference. A powerful god, a demon with the power of destruction, under the attack of Ron's god of death, turned into ashes. The power of a god could not be resisted. Ron, seeing that Ron was fine, Shea's heart trembled. She breathed a sigh of relief. Her body went soft, and she almost fell. This difficult battle was finally over. It was over! Ron looked into the distance, let out a long sigh, and gently closed his eyes. Chapter 657. On the devastated land, the surviving goblins emerged from the ground. They poked their heads out and looked at their surroundings in shock. The undead gathered around, and some necromancers began to cast healing spells on Gibbon and Susie despite their serious injuries. Her limbs were broken, and she had lost a lot of blood. She was on the verge of death, but her soul was not injured at all and recovered quickly. But Gibbon was not so lucky. His soul had almost been burned away by the demon's flames of destruction, and he only had one last breath left. Even though the injuries on his body had been healed, he still looked listless. Under the necromancer's superb healing spells, Susie, Gibbon, and the rest stood up. Heal her too. Susie, who was looking around, saw the seriously injured Shea and ordered her subordinates. This. Seeing that it was Shea who needed to be healed, the necromancer hesitated. He glanced at Gibbon and did not say anything. Although they both practiced necromancy magic, for these undead from the main plane, Ron and Shea were obviously not on the same side. Seeing that the necromancer did not move, Susie was angry. She glared and shouted, "What? Didn't you hear what I said? Cast healing spells on me right now." "Yes, your highness, Susie." Seeing that Gibbon did not object, the necromancer had no choice but to do as he was told. As the necromancer's healing spell lit up, Shea stood up. Her body was as good as new. "Thank you." Shea bowed slightly and thanked the necromancer sincerely. The undead, who were once rivals, stood together in the face of the powerful and terrifying devil. Ron, who was in the sky, saw all of this. He secretly nodded, and his figure moved, slowly descending. Sushi looked at Ron and opened his mouth, but he didn't say anything. Ji-Bin, on the other hand, turned his head away. He was arrogant and couldn't accept the fact that Ron was stronger than him. In the end, it was Sushi who spoke. "Ron, thank you very much for your help. If the Calamity Divine staff had fallen into the hands of the Infernal Court, the consequences would have been unimaginable." Ron nodded. "It's nothing. I'm also one of the undead. It's my duty to protect the symbol of the Scourge's highest authority. We can't let it fall into the hands of hell. No matter what, I'm still very grateful for your help." Sushi smiled and looked at Ron with a complicated expression. The Lich King, Susie's father, had indeed come to the Snow Orchid continent. He had left behind a fragment of his soul, but Susie didn't understand why his father's soul had passed on the last of his divine power of death to Ron. Why is it that, out of everyone, only this human who practices necromancy has received the favor of the Lich King's remnant soul, and not us? A huge question mark appeared in the hearts of all the undead. Sushi was the Lich King's daughter and the most powerful necromancer. She was also one of the noblest undead. Logically speaking, the Lich King should have given the last of his power to Sushi. Why would he give the powerful divine power of death to an outsider who had nothing to do with him? Ron was also pondering over this point. He also didn't understand why he had inexplicably received the inheritance of the Lich King's remnant power. Even though it was just a remnant of his power, it was still so powerful that it made people feel suffocated. In front of this power, the demons who possessed the power of destruction were instantly killed. Ron benefited from this. After the Lich King had personally used the divine power of death to transform him, he felt as if he had been reborn. This was an extremely mysterious feeling. After the influence of the divine power of death, his realm had greatly increased, and he had a deeper understanding of the profound meaning of the law of death. The undead looked at Ron with eyes full of envy. Perhaps this guy would advance to the divine realm soon. It had to be known that from the sacred domain onwards, every level of power was extremely difficult to advance. Some people, due to their limited talent, would be trapped in the sacred domain realm for tens of thousands of years. Just like that old holy necromancer. He was already a holy necromancer 10,000 years ago, but after 10,000 years, he still hadn't advanced to the realm of holy necromancer. One could imagine how difficult it was to advance in the profound meaning of the law of death. Damn it, why does it have to be this stinking brat? Why can't it be me? Ji-bin, on the other hand, stared at Ron with eyes full of jealousy. He clenched his fists tightly, and his heart was in turmoil. Sushi sighed slightly, but she was feeling a little down. Their purpose in coming to the Shulan continent was to find Nicole and seize the Calamity Divine Staff. However, they didn't get the Calamity Divine Staff, and Nicole was missing. She had lost many experts, and she didn't even know how to explain this to Ji-bin's father. At this moment, Sushi naturally wasn't in the mood to continue talking to Ron. She forced a smile and said, "If there's nothing else, then we'll be leaving. Goodbye, Your Excellency Ron. Your Excellency Shea." With that, she paused and glanced at Ron and Shea. "Also, if you've thought it through, you can come to the Plague Legion in the undead main plane to find us. The Plague Legion will not mistreat experts with true strength." Sushi hurriedly said a few words and was about to leave. At this moment, Ron called out to them, "Wait." At this moment, Ron bowed slightly and saluted. "My apologies, everyone. May I ask a question?" Hearing this, Sushi stopped in her tracks and turned around. She nodded. "Ask away." Ron pondered for a moment and asked, "I want to know, how is the Calamity Legion in the undead main plane now?" At this moment, Ron understood a little. The legendary Lich King was the commander of the Calamity Legion in the undead main plane. He had established the Scourge Church in the Noah continent. The Calamity Legion in the main plane and the Scourge Church in the secondary plane were successors. Ron urgently wanted to know how the Calamity Legion in the undead main plane was after the disappearance of the Lich King. Calamity Legion? Hearing this, Sushi laughed at herself and shook her head. She answered, "The Calamity Legion no longer exists in the undead main plane." What? Hearing this, Ron was shocked. His eyes widened. "You mean the Calamity Legion in the undead main plane no longer exists?" "Yes." Susie nodded and sighed deeply. Since Father's death, the Scourge has been divided into dozens of legions, large and small. Each of them is in charge of an area, and they are constantly at war. Some of the legions are even controlled by other powerful forces. In short, the main plane of the undead is now a mess. Ron was shocked. He had thought that the situation would be very serious, but the reality was much more serious than he had imagined. At this moment, his heart could not help but beat wildly. The Calamity Legion no longer existed. The blood-red skull flag that symbolized invincibility and invincibility. It was the symbol of the Calamity Legion that caused fear in the main plane. It had fallen with the death of the Lich King. Is this the result we want? Ron thought about this question. So, this is the reason why we want the Calamity Divine Staff. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. It was Ji-bin who had interrupted and said coldly, "My father, the Dreadlord, was once the Lich King's right-hand man. Ever since the Lich King died, he had been running between various forces. As the successor of the Lich King, he had the ambition to unify the entire undead main plane and revive the dead Calamity Legion. But it's a pity. You've ruined all of this." Ji-bin glared at Ron, his eyes full of hatred. At this moment, he blamed everything on Ron. "Don't blame Ron. Maybe some things are fated." Sushi sighed and tugged at her husband. "Forget it. Let's go." Humph. Ji-bin snorted unhappily. He looked at Ron unwillingly and turned to leave. He did not want to stay here for a moment longer. "Wait." Seeing that they were about to leave, Ron stopped them and said loudly, "I have one last question. Is the Lich King really dead?" Sushi's face darkened. She stopped and looked back at Ron. She slowly nodded. "How is this possible? The demon seed's aura has disappeared." In another main plane of hell, a female demon sat on a throne in the corner of a luxurious palace. She gritted her teeth as she spoke. Below her sat a few demons. They were all tall and strong, and their faces were ferocious. The Calamity Divine staff has also left that continent. Bastards, what are those merfolk doing? Damn it, they all deserve to die. The demon princess roared. At this moment, a red-haired demon said, "That's right. Those merfolk are incompetent. We should send an army to the Snow Orchid continent and kill them all." "Your Highness, you mustn't." Another purple-haired demon was shocked and immediately jumped out to stop her. "Our army is under great pressure on the Eastern Front. I believe that sending an army to conquer a secondary plane is not a wise decision." Hearing that demon's words, the demon princess quickly calmed down. She thought carefully and nodded. "That's right. Now is not the time to send an army to this secondary plane. Our current priority is the war on the Eastern Front. This secondary plane is not a big problem." "Yes, Your Highness." The purple-haired demon let out a sigh of relief and said, "Other than the war on the Eastern Front, we still have the matter of the Great Commander. As long as we can find the Great Commander, the war on the Eastern Front will naturally be resolved." "That's right." The demon princess raised her head. Her face was cold. She stood up and said in a clear voice, "Let's put the matter of the merfolk aside for now. These inferior races. They're a classic example of taking benefits but not doing anything. If it weren't for us, with their weak strength, would they be able to become the superior race of that secondary plane? Sooner or later, I will settle the score with them." The demon princess said fiercely. Her eyes revealed a deep killing intent. "Those incompetent fellows don't deserve to live in this world." Chapter 658. A blue breeze blew across the plains, and Xiao Qiao shyly lowered her head. The wide plains were soft and smooth like satin. After a while, a powerful aura appeared from the depths of the sky. In an instant, the wind and clouds began to gather. The powerful aura continued to spread, and the sky gradually darkened. It was as if a large net had been opened between the heavens and the earth, covering everything in the surroundings. What's going on? Why did the skies suddenly become dark? Aura, such a powerful aura. What is it? Did a strong person from the sacred domain descend? The nearest city, Undercity, also felt the strong throbbing. On the bustling streets, magic lamps lit up one by one. Everyone looked at the sky in shock, their faces filled with fear. Clang, clang, clang. The funeral bell of the Scourge Church's main altar rang out, and it echoed throughout Undercity. Enemy attack. Enemy attack. Undercity became chaotic. Countless soldiers rushed to the streets and directly activated Level 1 alert. They held their weapons in their hands and were ready for battle. The undead canopy rose, and Undercity was covered in fog. What's going on? Where are the enemies? The generals of the various legions quickly rushed over with their troops. They were fully armed and riding on tall skeletal horses. They gathered together and kept whispering to each other, but they did not see a single shadow of the enemy. The aura in the air became thicker, and it was as heavy as a boulder pressing down on everyone's heart. This feeling was suffocating. "Let's go find Lady Vivian," someone said, and this suggestion immediately received the support of all the legions under the Scourge Church. Before the situation was clear, it was necessary to seek orders from their superiors. On the Dragon Island in the northeast of the Noah continent, the chairman of the council, Fairy Dragon Frigga, and the vice-chairman of the council, Dark Dragon R.A. Firth, are sitting in the middle of the Dragon Island. In the Grand Hall, below them were wyverns of different levels. These wyverns all had the strength of the sacred domain. If they were placed in any corner of the Noah continent, they would be overlords. These overlord-class characters all had a solemn expression on their faces. They were in the middle of an important meeting on the Dragon Island, but now, the meeting was interrupted by this earth-shaking aura. Frigga raised her eyebrows and a hint of surprise flashed across her pretty face. She patted the armrest of the luxurious chair under her and turned around to face the Dark Dragon, R.A. Firth. "Lord Patriarch, did you sense it?" "I sensed it." The Dark Dragons, the Patriarch of the Dragon Clan, R.A. Firth, also had a solemn expression. He slowly stood up, his eyes fixed on the window, and said in a deep voice, "I'm afraid another deity realm expert has been born." Deity realm expert. All the wyverns below were stunned. It turned out that this earth-shaking power actually came from a deity realm expert. The birth of a deity realm expert was accompanied by an extremely powerful force that destroyed the stability of the surrounding space elements and caused a phenomenon in the world. The power of the world seemed to be welcoming the arrival of a deity realm expert. This power was extremely far away, and it didn't seem to be from the dragons. It was no wonder that Frigga and R.A. Firth's expressions didn't look too good. Who was it? Who was it that had become a deity realm expert? Other than the most outstanding dragons of the Noah continent. Which other race's expert could become a deity realm expert in such a short time? After all, it was extremely difficult for a sanctuary powerhouse to advance in strength. Becoming a god realm powerhouse was an impossible task. Only 1 out of 1,000 sanctuary powerhouses would be able to obtain such an honor. If this person wasn't from the dragons, then who could it be? Everyone had this question in their hearts. Could it be a Beaumont clan expert? The elder of the Water Dragon clan said at this time, his eyes filled with jealousy. Why wasn't this deity realm expert from the dragons? If there was another deity realm expert among the dragons, then the dragon's status in the Noah continent would be even more important. However, if this deity realm expert was from the Beaumont clan, then things would become very troublesome. The Beaumont clan had 2 deity realm experts, which was enough to be compared with the dragons. This was something that none of the dragons wanted to see. The reason why the dragons could suppress the Beaumont clan was that they had 2 deity realm experts, while there was only 1 Beaumont clan expert. No, the fairy dragon Frigga shook her head. This isn't the direction of the Beaumont clan. Who else could it be if it wasn't the Beaumont clan expert? This time, everyone was puzzled. The elder of the Fire Dragon clan said, "Could it be that there's a high-level magical beast race that is more outstanding than us dragons?" The dark dragon R.A. Firth slowly withdrew his gaze and shook his head. No, it seems that this aura doesn't come from the magical beast continent. It comes from... With that said, Raphael slowly turned around and swept his dignified gaze across the dragons one by one before he slowly said, "You're right. The human world." The human world? As soon as Raphael said this, the entire Dragon Clan's main hall seemed to have exploded. No way. How is that possible? How can an inferior race like the humans give birth to a deity realm expert? Yes. The number of sacred domain experts among the humans can't be compared to us magical beasts. How can a deity realm expert be born among the humans? Maybe it's a high-level magical beast living in the human world, no doubt. It can't be a human. Lord Patriarch must have sensed wrongly. The dragons argued one after another. They did not believe that the newly born deity realm expert would be a human. Calm down. Seeing that these people were arguing beyond reason, Frigga immediately waved her hand to calm them down. She turned to look at R.A. Firth and asked, "Lord Patriarch, can you speculate who this person is? I think that if he is someone from the Noah continent, we should know him." The Council of the Noah continent included all the sacred domain experts and above. Apart from the deity realm experts, the number of peak existences in the sacred domain could be counted on one's fingers, and it was none other than those few people. "I can't speculate." R.A. Firth shook his head and said, "This guy's aura is full of darkness and strangeness. Among the sacred domain experts I know, there doesn't seem to be such a person. However, I also feel that this aura seems to be very familiar." R.A. Firth thought as he fell into deep thought. Right, this guy's power comes from the kingdom of Ebbia in the human world. The kingdom of Ebbia? The Scourge Church? Frigga's eyes suddenly widened. Her eyes revealed a strong look of disbelief, and at the same time, her heart thumped. Could it be him? A familiar face appeared in Frigga's mind. It was a young man of about 21 or 22 years old. He had black hair, a thin figure, and a determined look with a hint of stubbornness. No, it can't be him. But soon, Frigga rejected this idea. Ron's strength is only at the beginning or middle level of the sacred domain. There's still a long way to go before he reaches the peak of the sacred domain, let alone becoming a deity realm expert. Frigga shook her head. Although Ron's talent in cultivation was very high, he was still too far away from becoming a deity realm expert. At this time, a light bulb flashed in Firth's mind. He thought of a person in his mind. His hands suddenly trembled, and he cried out involuntarily, could it be him? The human world, the Scourge Church, the peak expert of the sacred domain. Yes, it must be him. Apart from him, no one else among the humans had the qualifications to become a deity realm expert. Thinking of this, R.A. Firth sighed slightly. That powerful guy had become a deity realm expert. This was not good. Lord Patriarch, do you know who it is? R.A. Firth had just turned his head and met Frigga's questioning gaze. All the other dragons were also looking at him anxiously. They were eager to hear the answer from the Patriarch's mouth. That's right. A deity realm expert was born in the direction of the Scourge Church in the human world. Moreover, he is indeed a human. R.A. Firth nodded and replied. However, he did not give a direct answer to Frigga's question. He knew who it was, but he would not say it. Frigga's brows furrowed imperceptibly. R.A. Firth did not see Frigga's expression. Instead, he continued, Our council is about to welcome a senator. Frigga, you must be prepared for this. After saying that, Lafford hurriedly left the Dragon Clan's main hall, leaving behind the dumbfounded Dragon Clan experts. Lord Speaker, what should we do? After the Patriarch pulled Firth away, an elder of the dragons asked Frigga. Continue the meeting, Frigga said expressionlessly. In the Scourge Church's headquarters in Gloom City, the atmosphere was somewhat oppressive. Everyone looked at the sky uneasily, as if war was about to come. The Scourge Church's followers obeyed the church's orders and comforted the frightened people. Fully armed undead moved through Gloom City in neat rows. Spirit rings, as one of the defensive powers, a black prismatic crystal appeared at the top of the spirit summoning tower, emitting a large amount of soul energy. Once Gloom City was invaded, these spirit summoning towers would attack. Of course, the Scourge Church's followers were controlling the towers. Lord Commander, several fully armed soldiers were crowding outside of Grand Magus Necromancer Vivian's door. They were all officers of the various legions under the command of the Calamity Church. They were gathered outside Vivian's door, anxiously shouting. Vivian's current position was the commander of the various legions. She was the overall commander of the Scourge Church's armed forces and had the authority to mobilize the army. However, she only listened to Ron and the Grand Elder's orders and did not accept anyone else's authority. With a creak, the heavy wooden door opened, and Vivian, dressed in a black robe, walked out of the room. At this moment, she was expressionless. When the officers of the various legions saw Vivian, they immediately surrounded her. Lord Commander, according to the strange phenomenon in the sky, we sent out scouts, but they didn't find anything. A thin and small legion commander stepped forward and reported. Is the Holy See about to attack our Gloom City? A red-haired Death Knight asked. The legion has already made all preparations for battle. Lord Commander, please give the order. A tall and sturdy figure stepped forward and said loudly. Vivian didn't have the slightest trace of nervousness on her face, even though she sensed the atmosphere of the impending battle. She glanced at all the commanders of the Calamity Church around her and said calmly, Chapter 659. Yes, Lord Commander. All the commanders stood at attention. They obeyed Vivian's orders and returned to their stations. Vivian had her hands behind her back. She raised her head slightly and looked at the gloomy sky through the dark sky with a smile on her face. A powerful aura of death descended upon the Undercity, making people uneasy. The undead army on the main street had completely retreated. At this moment, a bolt of lightning as thick as a water bucket struck down with a boom, opening the curtains to the changes in the world. Boom, boom, boom. Countless bolts of lightning struck down, illuminating the sky. A powerful divine energy pierced through the sky, forming a spectacular pillar of light. The dark clouds in the sky seemed to have turned into ferocious beasts, roaring and rolling. Strong winds blew on the ground, causing sand and stones to fly everywhere. Lightning, thunder, dark clouds, and strong winds intertwined, forming a ferocious and terrifying image of the Grim Reaper in the sky. In the Undercity, the birth of a divine powerhouse attracted the attention of all parties. In the distance, as long as it was a powerhouse of the sacred domain or above, they could strongly sense this power. This power was too powerful. The powerful death energy swept in all directions, causing a change in the world. This change also alarmed the mercenaries in the tavern in another city. Oh my God! Another divine powerhouse has been born. Such a powerful and terrifying power. A yellow-haired mercenary exclaimed. Is this the power of a divine realm? Oh my God! It's too scary. Another knight said with lingering fear. Who is it that ascended to the divine realm? An archer with a longbow on his back had a solemn expression. I don't know. It seems to be in the direction of the Undercity, someone answered. The Undercity? The Scourge Church? Oh my God! Are the humans finally going to rise? A divine powerhouse has finally appeared among the humans? A chestnut-haired mercenary exclaimed. His face was full of excitement. Even if they ascended to the divine realm in the Undercity, I don't think it's us humans, right? Another mercenary questioned. In a corner of the hotel, a bearded middle-aged man was drinking by himself. In front of him, there were dozens of empty wine bottles. It was as if the chaos outside had nothing to do with him. He picked up the wine bottle, poured himself a glass, raised his head, and drank it in one gulp. Looking at the empty tavern, the middle-aged man smacked his lips and revealed a satisfied smile. At this moment, he looked out the window and smiled. Looks like there's going to be a lot of things happening in the Noah continent. How long has it been peaceful? In the human world, some people were secretly happy, and some were pessimistic. The birth of a divine powerhouse was not as simple as having one more senator in the parliament. He was enough to change the power structure of the entire Noah continent. This indicated that the human race had already become an existence on par with the high-grade orcs and elves. Are there humans over there? Dark elf Aurora stood on top of a tall tree and looked into the distance. She was wearing a jade-green elven short garment, a longbow in her hand, and a pair of small elven boots on her feet. She looked extremely agile. Aurora's current strength was already at the peak of the master level. She was only one step away from entering the sacred domain. Beside Aurora stood her companion, the high priestess of the elves, the divine powerhouse Undine. Her beautiful eyes were quietly looking into the distance as she spoke slowly. That's right. This powerful aura is coming from the direction of the human world. More accurately, it's coming from the Scourge Church. The Scourge Church? Aurora was stunned for a moment. The next moment, her face was filled with pleasant surprise. Could it be Ron? Ron has advanced to the divine realm? Aurora knew that Ron was a powerhouse of the sacred domain. However, she did not expect that Ron would advance to the divine realm in just a year and a half. Wasn't this too fast? It shouldn't be him. High Priestess Undine hesitated for a moment and shook her head. This aura doesn't seem like it. Moreover, Ron has just entered the sacred domain not long ago. To advance to the divine realm so quickly. Although he has extremely high talent in the cultivation of undead energy, I don't think it's possible. Oh. Hearing Undine's affirmative answer, Aurora nodded in disappointment. She was happy for Ron from the bottom of her heart that he had advanced to the divine realm. Undine glanced at Aurora and smiled. Aurora, you have to work hard too. Otherwise, Ron will leave you further and further behind. Don't you want to become powerful enough to help him? Ever since she met Ron, Aurora had shown a trace of disappointment. As Ron grew stronger, she felt that the distance between her and Ron was increasing. This was especially true after Shea advanced to the sacred domain. This made her feel even more anxious. Aurora hoped that when danger came, she could stand side by side with him, not hide behind him like a little girl and accept his protection. This was unacceptable for a proud elf like her, even though she knew that Ron did not mind. This was also the reason why Aurora refused to leave with Ron and stayed in the elf forest to cultivate the power of nature with Undine. If she was willing, she would have married Ron long ago like Kadena and Becerra. In fact, Ron had been waiting for her all this time. Yes, Neen. Aurora's eyes showed a trace of determination. I will work hard to be with him. Undine nodded and sighed in her heart. The power of love was really great. Aurora could cultivate desperately in elf forest for Ron. Until today, her power of nature had greatly improved. Perhaps, in the near future, she would break through to the sacred domain. This was rare, even among elves of Aurora's age. On the other side of the Noah continent, in the Holy Roman Empire, in the temple of Mount Hyjal, the powerhouses of the Holy See were already in a mess. They had already received news that someone in the Scourge Church had advanced to the sacred domain. Your Majesty, Pope, we must immediately assemble the army and attack Undercity. Otherwise, it will be too late. Dragon Knight Helen knelt on one knee and said in a deep voice, "No, do you want us to die?" A voice said loudly. He was the chief judge of the Holy See Guangming, Ivan. What kind of strength do we have? What kind of strength does the Scourge Church have? Even if they don't have a sacred domain powerhouse, we can't defeat them, Ivan said loudly, waving his arms exaggeratedly. There was a look of fear in his eyes. He was frightened by the earth-shattering aura of the undead. If the Scourge Church gave birth to a sacred domain powerhouse, it would change the power structure of the entire Noah continent. Those with brains would think that these heretics who were full of hatred for the Holy See would be the first to attack the Curia. They felt the fear of the end of the world. The Pope of the Holy Church, Ernst, was sitting on his throne. His hair was white, and his hand that was holding the scepter was hanging limply. It seemed like he was thinking about something, but at the same time, it seemed like he wasn't thinking about anything at all. He just let the elders argue in the palace of God, as if none of this had anything to do with him. Lord Pope, what do you mean? After quarreling for a while, the elders were a little tired, so Helen turned his head and asked. Pope's zombie-like figure moved slightly. He slowly raised his head and glanced at the several sacred domain powerhouses. His heart was filled with sorrow. Wharton was dead. Holy Priest Imina had died. Leader of the Holy Knights Boulder was dead. Guangming's chief judge Nord was dead. The Hall of Faith's Archbishop Dokit was dead. The new sacred domain powerhouses who joined the Holy See, Vicardo and Higman, were also dead. In the huge Holy See, there were less than 3 sacred domain powerhouses left. This was not even comparable to the number of sacred domain powerhouses in an empire. Every time he thought of this, Ernst's heart felt like it was being pierced by needles. In contrast, the Scourge Church's development was flourishing. They were like a magnet, absorbing a large number of talents. Geniuses who cultivated the power of the dead emerged one after another. Soon, the Abia Empire became an existence that surpassed the Holy Roman Empire and the Roland Empire. Now, another powerhouse of the divine realm was born. How can anyone live? Are these heretics really that powerful? Ernst was unwilling, extremely unwilling. Once upon a time, he was also one of the geniuses who cultivated the power of Guangming. Step by step, he climbed to the pinnacle of power in the human world. But now, he was powerless as he watched the Holy See decline step by step. Ernst raised his eyelids. His gaze fell on a young and beautiful face. He paused, took a deep breath, and slowly asked, Your Excellency Gadilai, what do you think of this matter? The Saintess of Guangming, Gadilai, was wearing a white priest's robe. She sat quietly on the side, watching the elders argue without saying anything. She was sitting in the original seat of the holy priest, Imina, in the Hall of Redemption. After several years of cultivation, Gadilai, who had the fire attribute of Guangming, already had the strength of the sacred domain. She had also become a powerful holy priest. Hearing Pope's question, Gadilai stood up slowly. Her expression was gentle and demure, and she gently bowed. Your Majesty Pope, I think that in this current situation, we can only seek help from the council. The council? All the elders were surprised when they heard this. Ivan, the head of the Guangming Inquisition, frowned. Your Excellency Gadilai, why do you think that the powerhouses of the divine realm of the council will definitely help us? In the past, Ivan, the head of the Guangming Inquisition, directly called Gadilai by her name. But now that Gadilai had become the rear guard of the Hall of Redemption, he added the word "Your Excellency," before his words. God Eli smiled slightly. "It's very simple. The appearance of a powerhouse of the divine realm in the human world is bound to affect the interests of some higher races. I believe that they also don't want to see the appearance of a human powerhouse of the divine realm. In this regard, as long as we provoke and exploit them, we can suppress them." God Eli paused, then continued, "Don't forget, our Holy See has signed an armistice agreement with the Scourge Church. If the Scourge Church dares to risk universal condemnation and attack us, not only will they lose their credibility, but they will also ruthlessly slap the council in the face. I believe that the chairman and senators of the council don't want to see this happen." God Eli's words made everyone fall into silence. It had to be said that they all thought that God Eli's words made sense, and there was no other way. At this time, God Eli added, "Of course, this is only a temporary measure. If we want to completely solve the problem of the Scourge Church, in addition to strengthening the strength of our Holy See, we also need to produce a powerhouse of the divine realm. In the Undercity at the southern end of the Abia Empire, the tremors finally stopped, and the powerful aura finally dissipated slowly, revealing the sun through the clouds. Undercity. Outside a luxurious palace, blackheads were lined up neatly in a row. They were dressed in black armor and black robes, and their expressions were solemn. These people were the core members of the Scourge Church: Gus, Vivian, Kadena, Becerra, Kate, Delin, Paige, Lisa, and the others. There were also countless undead soldiers. They stood quietly, as if waiting for something. At this time, the doors of the luxurious palace creaked open, and a cold and turbid aura seeped out. At the same time, a thin figure appeared. With a crash, all the undead knelt down on one knee and shouted in unison, "Congratulations to the great elder for advancing to the divine realm." Along with the uniform voices, an old man in a black robe slowly walked out. He faced the crowd and nodded indifferently, his face expressionless. This old man was Ron's mentor, the great elder of the Scourge Church, and also the main character of this advancement to the divine realm. Chapter 660. At this moment, Homelin's entire body exuded a demonic and terrifying aura. His eyes flickered, his long white hair danced in the wind, and his black robe fluttered in the absence of wind. In the surrounding space, he formed an invisible pressure that made it hard for people to breathe. In the secondary planes, God Realm experts were already the pinnacle of existence, just like the various senators in the parliament. In the Noah continent, no one dared to provoke them. In front of Homelin, no one dared to breathe loudly. The surroundings were so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. "Rise," Homelin said slowly. "Yes, Lord Grand Elder." At this moment, everyone saluted as if they had been pardoned and stood up. Vivian said with a smile, "Congratulations to Lord Grand Elder for ascending to God Realm. Our Scourge Church has finally produced its first God Realm expert." Homelin smiled. "Vivian, you have to work hard too. Logically speaking, you should also be ascending to the sacred domain soon." Vivian lowered her head. "I'm sorry, Lord Grand Elder. I've disappointed you." "It's fine." Homelin waved his hand magnanimously. "Speed won't bring success. Cultivation must be done step by step and maintain a state of mind that goes with the flow. I've been stuck at the sacred domain level for 100,000 years. Isn't it the same? Thank you for your guidance, Lord Grand Elder. I've learned a lot." Vivian bowed gracefully. Homelin smiled. Then his expression turned serious. "Vivian, pass down my order. Order the Scourge Church's legions to assemble immediately." "Assemble immediately?" Vivian was shocked. "Lord Grand Elder, your northern expedition," Homelin said resolutely, a trace of malevolence faintly appearing on his face. "Some people have been peaceful for too long. It's time to settle the score with them." Vivian was shocked. "Lord Grand Elder, you're attacking the Holy See? Not bad." Homelin raised his head slightly and looked at the distant sky with his eagle-like eyes, as if he wanted to see through the fog in the distance. His black robe fluttered with a pung sound, and his body emitted a powerful battle intent. The hatred that had lasted for 100,000 years continued to grow. The Scourge Church had endured for so many years, suppressing their anger like the magma of a volcano. One day it would erupt. Yes, attack the Holy See and kill Mount Shangel. Kill all those swindlers. Kill, kill, kill. As soon as Hamelin finished speaking, the officers and generals below immediately became agitated. Hatred would spread. The history of 100,000 years ago had been written into the history books of the Scourge Church. Every member of the church felt grief and anger for that unbearable humiliation. Wait, Vivian was a little anxious. She reminded, Lord Grand Elder, don't forget about the existence of the assembly. The Scourge Church signed the Armistice Agreement in the assembly. In other words, if the Scourge Church were to break the Armistice Agreement now, they would immediately be attacked by the powerhouses of the assembly. Haha, so what? Hamelin smiled coldly, his gaze becoming extremely vulgar. No one could stop the Scourge Church, not even the assembly. He paused and sneered. Send someone to tell all the powerhouses of the Scourge Church to withdraw. The assembly. Vivian was shocked. What? We're all withdrawing from the assembly? That's right. Hamelin sneered. We don't have to care about their feelings anymore. After withdrawing from the assembly, we'll immediately start the Northern Expedition. Vivian felt that her brain was about to stop working. She bit her lip. Lord Grand Elder, do you want to discuss this with young Master Ron? No need. Hamelin flatly refused. Ron is still in another plane and has yet to return. I don't know when he'll be back. Besides, I have enough strength to deal with all problems. After becoming a god-level powerhouse, Hamelin was extremely confident in his own strength. The Holy See's strength had been greatly reduced, and he did not need to personally take action. Gu Si, K, Di Lin, and a few other powerhouses of the sacred domain were enough to deal with them. What he really needed to pay attention to was the assembly. If not for the assembly's interference, the Scourge Church would have destroyed the Holy See long ago. This was also the reason why Vivian had been worried. However, Hamelin had a different opinion about this. He judged that after becoming a god-level powerhouse, the assembly would no longer interfere. The reason was simple. Although the Holy See was an extremely large force in the human world, in the eyes of the powerhouses of the assembly, it was only an insignificant existence. Under the circumstances where their own safety was not at stake, no god-level powerhouse would fight another god-level powerhouse to the death. The dragons would not, nor would the Beaumont clan. The orcs and elves would not, even less. There was no benefit to winning, and if they lost, it would be a great loss. What if they were careless and died? It should be known that other than the highest level dragons, the other races only had one powerhouse of the sacred domain. If Hamelin was still at the pinnacle of the sacred domain, these powerhouses would still teach him a lesson. However, now that Hamelin had become a god-level powerhouse, it was not worth it to fight with him. Powerhouses who could become a god-level powerhouse were no fools. The assembly was also not a monolithic block. No one would do something that would only bring them losses if there were no benefits. Seeing Hamelin's insistence, Vivian did not intend to say anything else. She bowed slightly and saluted. Yes, Great Elder. I will go and prepare immediately. In the depths of the Noah continent, in a spatial rift of a plane. This was the residence of the Noah continent's plane manager, Noah. The spatial rift was a space that he opened and was connected to the mercenary guild headquarters. Without permission, no one could enter. Lord Noah, you're finally back. When Noah stepped into his home, he bumped into Mary. She looked at Noah and frowned slightly. My lord, you went drinking again? Yes, huh? Noah smiled. He was the middle-aged man from the tavern just now. Mary knew that this Lord Noah did not have any other hobbies, but he liked to hang around the various taverns of the continent and drink a few cups from time to time. See, he came back with the smell of alcohol all over his body. Haha, I drank a little. Noah smiled and changed the topic. Mary, what's the matter? You seem to be very anxious. Lord Noah, something big has happened. Mary quickly walked over and said in a low voice, according to the news I received, the Scourge Church's great elder Hamelin has become a god-level powerhouse. Hearing this news, Noah softly said, Oh, this news is spread like wildfire. I already knew about it. Homelin has become a god-level powerhouse. This is a good thing. He has been in the sacred domain for 100,000 years. It's not strange for him to be promoted. Mary stomped her foot and said anxiously, Lord Noah, do you really not know, or are you pretending not to know? The Scourge Church and the Holy See have a deep-seated hatred. Now that a god-level powerhouse has been born in the Scourge Church, this is enough to break the balance of strength between the two sides. Mary continued, I think that the Scourge Church will definitely use this advantage to launch another war that will engulf the entire human world. When that time comes, the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. I'm afraid that this is not something that a plain manager like you would want to see. Noah smiled. Even Mary could see it, so could he. However, he didn't look nervous at all. Instead, he said with a smile, let's talk about it later. Chapter 661. 3 hours after Great Elder Homelin gave the order, the entire Undercity was mobilized. The undead army stationed in various places gathered at the border. At the same time, Vivian wrote a letter requesting assistance from the Abia royal family. After reading the letter, Her Majesty Juliana was also straightforward. Without saying a word, she sent out Lachlan, who was already a great general, to lead an army of 300,000 to join forces with Vivian's undead army. 17 hours after Great Elder Homelin gave the order, the Abia Empire and the Holy Roman Empire gathered an army of 450,000. Among them, 100,000 were the elite troops led by Vivian. They were all professionals who cultivated the power of the soul. These undead, who wore black robes and black armor, received the highest instructions from the Scourge Church's great elder and gathered in the Abia Empire's strategic border town, Tanning City. They lined up in an orderly manner. Looking from above, the entire Tanning City turned into a black sea. Countless skeletal horses shuttled through the streets of Tanning City. Death Knights in heavy armor rode on the skeletal horses. Necromancers and necromancers held dark green staffs in their hands, guarding the surroundings. From time to time, a black shadow would streak across the sky. It was a necromancer riding a gargoyle. The heavy meat grinder moved slowly on the bluestone paved street. The sharp spikes scratched the ground and made ear-piercing sounds. At this time, a 10 Victories stone statue also walked on the street, following behind the meat grinder and moving forward slowly. The appearance of this strange war machine aroused the curiosity of some undead. Look, what's this thing? A young female Death Knight, riding on a skeletal horse, pointed the sword in her hand at the 10 Victories stone statue and exclaimed in surprise. This thing is called the stone statue of 10 Victories. It's one of the most powerful war machines of the Scourge Church. A female necromancer beside her said, her voice full of pride. The origin of the 10 Victories stone statue was the result of Ron obtaining the design of the 10 Victories stone statue left behind by the Scourge Church from 100,000 years ago. After that, he gave it to Fatty Gid. Gid immediately organized people and invested a lot of money to produce the war machine. It had been manufactured some time ago, and there were only a dozen or so of them. Many of the undead had never seen them before. The female necromancer had only read about it in a book. It was her first time seeing it in real life. This is the 10 Victories stone statue mentioned in the book. The female Death Knight's eyes were filled with curiosity. She rode her horse and curiously went up to touch it. She only felt that it was hard, like it was made of metal but not wood. This action naturally caused the soldiers of the Scourge Church who were guarding the stone statue of 10 Victories to glare at them. Sorry. The young female Death Knight awkwardly stuck out her tongue and withdrew her hand. The soldiers of the Scourge Church glanced at her, then took the 10 Victories stone statue and left. If it wasn't for the fact that the beautiful girl was a Death Knight, they would have already arrested her as a spy. The young female Death Knight immediately retreated into the crowd and stood with her companions. However, she still looked at the 10 Victories stone statue with interest, as if it had a strange magical power. Hey, do you know what the 10 Victories stone statue is used for? The female Death Knight asked her companions. You don't even know? The female necromancer pushed the glasses on the bridge of her nose. The 10 Victories stone statue is also known as the Death's Protection. It's a powerful war machine. Standing next to the 10 Victories stone statue can comfort the souls of the undead. At the same time, it can heal injuries and recover soul power, the female necromancer explained without stopping. It really is something good. The female Death Knight's eyes lit up. Isn't this the same as my evil aura? The female necromancer smiled. Your evil aura can only heal injured undead. It can't recover soul power. The female Death Knight replied with an "oh." She thought to herself that she had to get Fong Gaojia closer to the 10 Victories stone statue during battle. At the same time, she asked her companions, "Right? How do you know so much?" "The instructors in the Calamity Academy told me about it." "Didn't you listen in class?" The female necromancer replied. The female Death Knight was speechless. Indeed, she hadn't listened. Even the 10 Victories stone statue has appeared. It seems like the Great Elder is determined to destroy the Holy See this time. The female necromancer muttered to herself as she watched the 10 Victories stone statue disappear into the distance. 23 hours after Great Elder Homelin gave the order, the late emissary of the Parliament finally arrived. Great Elder Homelin received him in the Calamity Hall. The emissary of the Parliament was a water-type dragon. He first sent the blessings of the Parliament's chairman Frigga to Homelin. At the same time, he invited him to become the 6th senator of the Parliament. Homelin rejected the invitation without hesitation. At the same time, he asked the emissary of the dragons to convey a message to Frigga. "You mean the Scourge Church and all powerhouses of the sacred domain and above are to withdraw from the Parliament? And they won't be joining the Parliament in the future?" The emissary of the dragons was stunned when he heard what Homelin wanted him to convey to Chairman Frigga. That's right. Homelin sat in the middle of the Great Hall. His black robe made him look even more solemn. "No." The emissary of the dragons flatly refused. The Parliament is the peace organization of the Noah continent. It has supreme authority. Of course, it is up to the powerhouses to decide whether they want to join the Parliament. But once they join, they can never leave. "Sorry, Great Elder Homelin, I can't agree to this. There is no precedent for this in the Parliament." "Then I will set a precedent." Homelin raised his voice and said coldly, "You just need to convey this message. You don't need to care about anything else. You can't care about it anyway." The emissary of the dragons was furious when he heard this. As a powerful magical beast, one of the highest races in the Noah continent, he had never been humiliated like this before. He gritted his teeth and was about to explode. In an instant, the surrounding temperature dropped by a few degrees, as if winter had arrived. A faint killing intent leaked out from the emissary of the dragons. Homelin's face was cold and expressionless. He sat there motionlessly as if he did not put the most powerful magical beast in the Noah continent in his eyes. Pfft. A contemptuous laugh came from the quiet shrine. It was from Vivian. She was laughing at the sacred domain wyvern for being impudent in front of the Great Elder. He was simply overestimating himself. The undead at the side also revealed a mocking smile. The Dragon Clan emissary's heart went cold. He began to understand the situation he was in. This terrifying old man in front of him was not the human that the Dragon Clan could bully, but a genuine powerhouse of the realm of the gods. This fellow is so powerful. From the aura he released, even the Patriarch might not have a chance of winning against him. The emissary of the dragons silently calculated in his heart. The arrogance on his body was immediately restrained. At this time, he forced a smile and gently bowed. "Since the Great Elder has such a request, I will certainly convey it to the chairman, Frigga." He deliberately emphasized the words Frigga. At the same time, he carefully observed Homelin's expression to see how he would react when he heard the chairman's name. But he was soon disappointed. The terrifying human old man in front of him did not show any reaction. He did not even show a trace of fear. The emissary of the dragons clenched his teeth. "If the Great Elder has nothing else, I will take my leave first. I won't see you out," Homelin coldly said. The emissary of the dragons sighed slightly and left dejectedly. He was now thinking about how to explain to Frigga and the Patriarch. When he walked to the door of the hall, Homelin's voice sounded in his ears. You can go back and tell Frigga that the Scourge Church will soon launch an all-out war against the Holy See. If she is dissatisfied with this, she can come at me. The emissary of the dragons stopped in his tracks. His body shook violently. He turned his head and said humbly, "Yes. Great Elder, I will convey it as it is." 34 hours after Homelin gave the order, the army of the Scourge Church and the Abia Empire, who were ready for battle, set out from Tanning City. Hundreds of thousands of troops crossed the ceasefire line originally drawn by the Council and launched an all-out attack on the Holy See and the Holy Roman Empire. The codename of this war was Revenge. Chapter 662. At this moment, Homelin's entire body exuded a demonic and terrifying aura. His eyes flickered, his long white hair danced in the wind, and his black robe fluttered even though there was no wind. In the surrounding space, he formed an invisible pressure that made it hard for people to breathe. In the secondary planes, God Realm experts were already the pinnacle of existence, just like the various senators in the parliament. In the Noah continent, no one dared to provoke them. In front of Homelin, no one dared to breathe loudly. The surroundings were so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. "Rise," Homelin said slowly. "Yes, Great Elder." At this moment, everyone saluted as if they had been pardoned and stood up. Vivian said with a smile, "Congratulations to Great Elder for advancing to God Realm. Our Scourge Church has finally produced its first God Realm expert." Homelin smiled. "Vivian, you have to work hard too. Logically speaking, you should also be advancing to the sacred domains soon." Vivian lowered her head. "I'm sorry, Great Elder. I've disappointed you." "It's fine." Homelin waved his hand magnanimously. "Speed won't bring success. Cultivation must be done step by step and maintain a state of mind that goes with the flow. I've also been troubled by the sacred domain level for 100,000 years. Isn't it the same? Thank you for your guidance, Great Elder. I've learned a lot." Vivian bowed gracefully. Homelin smiled. Then his expression turned serious. "Vivian, pass down my order. Order the Scourge Church's legions to assemble immediately." "Assemble immediately?" Vivian was shocked. "Great Elder, your northern expedition," Homelin said resolutely, a trace of ferocity faintly appearing on his face. "Some people have been peaceful for too long. It's time to settle the score with them." Vivian was shocked. "Great Elder, you're attacking the Holy See? Not bad." Homelin slightly raised his head and looked at the distant sky with his eagle-like eyes. It was as if he wanted to see through the mist in the distance. His black robe fluttered in the wind as his body emitted a powerful battle intent. The hatred that had lasted for 100,000 years continued to grow. The Scourge Church had endured for so many years, and the anger that they had suppressed was like a volcano that would erupt one day. Yes, attack the Holy See and kill Mount Shangel. Kill all those swindlers. Kill, kill, kill. As soon as Homelin finished speaking, the officers and generals below immediately became agitated. Hatred would spread. The history of 100,000 years ago had been written into the history books of the Scourge Church. Every member of the church felt grief and anger for that unbearable humiliation. Wait. Vivian was a little anxious. She reminded, "Great Elder, don't forget about the existence of the assembly." The Scourge Church signed the armistice agreement during the assembly. In other words, if the Scourge Church were to break the armistice agreement now, they would immediately be attacked by the powerhouses of the assembly. Haha, so what? Homelin smiled coldly, his gaze becoming extremely vulgar. No one can stop the Scourge Church, not even the assembly. He paused for a moment, then sneered. "Send someone to tell all the powerhouses of the Scourge Church to withdraw." The assembly. Vivian was shocked. "What? We're all withdrawing from the assembly?" "That's right." Homelin sneered. "We don't have to care about their feelings anymore. After withdrawing from the assembly, we'll immediately begin the northern expedition." Vivian felt that her brain was about to stop working. She bit her lip. "Great Elder, do you want to discuss this with young Master Ron?" "No need." Homelin flatly refused. Ron is still in another plane and has yet to return. I don't know when he'll be back. Besides, I have enough strength to deal with all problems. After becoming a god-level powerhouse, Hamelin was extremely confident in his own strength. The Holy See's strength had been greatly reduced, and he did not need to personally take action. Gu Si, K, D Lin, and a few other powerhouses of the sacred domain were enough to deal with it. The only thing he really needed to pay attention to was the Assembly. If not for the Assembly's interference, the Scourge Church would have destroyed the Holy See long ago. This was also the reason why Vivian had been worried. However, Hamelin had a different opinion about this. He judged that after becoming a god-level powerhouse, the Assembly would no longer interfere. The reason was simple. Although the Holy See was an extremely powerful force in the human world, in the eyes of the powerhouses of the Assembly, it was just an insignificant existence. Under the circumstances where their own safety was not at stake, no god-level powerhouse would fight to the death with another god-level powerhouse. The dragons would not, nor would the Beaumont clan, nor would the orcs and elves. There would be no benefits if they won, but if they lost, it would be an even greater loss. What if they were careless and died? It should be known that other than the most powerful dragons, the other races only had one powerhouse of the sacred domain. If Hamelin was still at the pinnacle of the sacred domain, these powerhouses would still teach him a lesson. However, now that Hamelin had become a god-level powerhouse, it was not worth it to fight with him. Powerhouses who could become a god-level powerhouse were no fools. The Assembly was also not a monolithic block. No one would do something that would only bring them losses if there were no benefits. Seeing Hamelin's insistence, Vivian was not prepared to say anything else. She bowed slightly and saluted. Yes, Great Elder. I'll go prepare immediately. In the depths of the Noah continent, in a dimensional rift. This was the residence of the Noah continent's plane manager, Noah. The dimensional rift was a space he opened and was connected to the mercenary guild headquarters. Without permission, no one could enter. Lord Noah, you're finally back. When Noah stepped into his home, he bumped into Mary. She looked at Noah and frowned slightly. My lord, you went drinking again? Yes, haha. Noah smiled. He was the middle-aged man from the tavern just now. Mary knew that this Lord Noah did not have any other hobbies, but he liked to hang around the various taverns of the continent and drink a few cups from time to time. Now, he had returned with the smell of alcohol all over his body. I drank a little. Noah smiled and changed the topic. Mary, what's the matter? You seem to be very anxious. Lord Noah, something big has happened. Mary quickly walked over and said in a low voice, according to the news I received, the Scourge Church's great elder Hamelin has become a god-level powerhouse. Hearing this news, Noah softly said, Oh, this news has spread like wildfire. I already knew about it. Hamelin has become a god-level powerhouse. This is a good thing. He has been in the sacred domain for 100,000 years. It's not strange for him to be promoted. Mary stomped her foot and said anxiously, Lord Noah, do you really not know, or are you pretending not to know? The Scourge Church and the Holy See have a deep-seated hatred. Now that a god-level powerhouse has been born in the Scourge Church, this is enough to break the balance of strength between the two sides. Mary continued, I think that the Scourge Church will definitely use this advantage to launch another war that will engulf the entire human world. When that time comes, the people will be plunged into misery and suffering. I'm afraid that this is not something that a plain manager like you would like to see. Noah smiled. If even Mary could see this, he could naturally see it as well. However, at this moment, he did not look nervous at all and said with a smile, Chapter 663. Kill, charge, kill them all, go to hell. Damn scammers. On the boundless grassland, hundreds of thousands of undead soldiers launched a huge attack on the Holy Roman Empire's main cities and border towns. Countless undead swarmed in like a tide. Looking from the sky, it looked like a black army of ants marching. Boom, boom, boom. The meat grinders of the undead army dropped countless pieces of bloody corpses. These pieces of corpses fell on the city walls and exploded like cannonballs. Blood splattered everywhere, and a foul smell filled the air. The bright red things were like living balls of meat that kept squirming. It looked indescribably disgusting. The most terrifying thing was that these pieces of corpses could spread a plague. Countless undead stood at the foot of the city walls. Specters with ranged attacks bombarded the city walls like raindrops, causing the sturdy walls to crumble and collapse. Countless corpses were left behind, all of which belonged to Holy Empire soldiers. Retreat. Retreat immediately. The soldiers on the city walls saw that the situation was not good and shouted loudly. At the same time, they organized the defenders on the city walls to retreat. Unfortunately, he was very unlucky. He saw a huge gargoyle descend from the sky and grab him. In the blink of an eye, he was taken into the sky and was torn to pieces. The difference in strength was too great. The Scourge army only attacked for a little more than an hour, and the defenders of the Holy Roman Empire's border town, Asinaris, were killed. Blood flowed like a river. What was even more terrifying was that until now, they had not even sent out the Sacred Domain's experts. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses, as well as the summoned undead army, crowded on the small battlefield. Countless blood-red skull flags fluttered in the air, and it was terrifying. Boom! There was a loud sound. The enormous city gates fell down with a dull thud. Asinaris opened the gates wide and spread her legs like a virgin weakly, causing the Calamity Church's army to erupt into cheers that were as loud as the mountains and seas. The city is breached. The city is breached. Charge! Charge into the city! The soldiers of the Scourge Church let out a roar that shook the heavens and the earth. Woo! The horn of death was blown, and the undead army of the Scourge Church was at the core of the attack. They were like a tide, crazily surging into the city, wantonly slaughtering. This huge city, which was known as a solid fortress, fell after only 2 hours of resistance. Not long after, the blood-red skull flag fluttered above the city walls of Asinaris. The whole process was an undeclared war. The Scourge Church and the Ebia Empire quickly gathered a large army at the border and attacked the Holy See and the Holy Roman Empire at lightning speed. Thick black smoke rose into the sky. The flames on the ground had yet to be extinguished. The city of Asinaris, which had been breached, was filled with the pungent smell of blood. The people who had yet to recover from the shock looked at the undead army shuttling through the streets with fear in their eyes, their bodies constantly trembling. The soldiers of the Ebia Empire had already put up placards on the streets, informing the civilians that the war was over. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Her Majesty Juliana of the Ebia Empire had already made all kinds of plans. The Ebia army had plenty of experience in dealing with this kind of situation. The Scourge Church's strategy towards the civilians was mainly to appease them. However, they would not be so polite towards the Holy See's cathedral. As long as it was a church building, it would be mercilessly destroyed by the Scourge Church. Those priests and bishops who were usually high and mighty were pushed out and executed in front of everyone. On the other side, the commander-in-chief of the Scourge army, Vivian, and the general of the Ebia Empire, Lachlan, were fully armed and escorted by soldiers as they walked into the city lord's manor side by side. Perhaps it was because the attack had been very successful, but the two of them had relaxed smiles on their faces. This city lord's manor is really big. It's almost as big as the palace of our Ebia Empire. Lachlan couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the spacious and glorious city lord's manor. Vivian smiled. The Holy Roman Empire has been established for many years. Its foundation and heritage are not something that the Ebia Empire, which has only been established for a few years, can compare to. However, I believe that given the time and wealth of the Ebia Empire, it won't be difficult for them to build an even more spacious palace. Lachlan chuckled dryly and didn't continue on this topic. Right, Lady Vivian. Lachlan turned slightly to face Vivian, staring at her without blinking. Our next step is to directly attack Mount Shangel, right? Attack Mount Shangel. After hearing Lachlan's words, Vivian suddenly stopped in her tracks. She slowly raised her head, and a strong murderous intent flashed in her eyes. With the strength of the Scourge Church and the Ebia Empire, as well as Homeland's god-level powerhouses, it wouldn't be difficult to attack Mount Hyjal. The current Holy See was no longer the Holy See of the past. The Holy See, whose strength had been greatly reduced, was no longer able to maintain its own interests and territory. If it weren't for the Armistice Agreement, they would have been wiped out long ago. Vivian knew that destroying the Holy See and flattening Mount Hyjal had always been Ron's wish. Vivian would fulfill this wish for him, but her rationality told her that she couldn't do so. No, we can't attack Mount Hyjal now. Vivian shook her head and rejected Lachlan's suggestion. What's wrong? Lachlan was just about to leave, but he stopped and looked at her in shock. Vivian took a deep breath and said loudly, "According to the Great Elder, the Scourge Church's war operation called Revenge is just a cover. Our goal isn't as simple as destroying the Holy See, but to fully take over the entire Holy Roman Empire. We'll keep squeezing the strategic space of Mount Hyjal until—" Vivian paused for a moment. "Spread the teachings and beliefs of the Scourge Church throughout the human world." What? Lachlan's heart skipped a beat, and he took a deep breath. This was destroying the entire Holy Church from its roots. Vivian continued, "If it's just to destroy the Holy See, the Great Elder alone is enough. A divine undead magus with the power of the divine realm is an existence that they can't resist." Lachlan nodded after hearing this. He thought for a moment and couldn't help but say, "Will the Council, who are known as the administrators of the Noah continent, sit back and do nothing? Don't forget that the Scourge Church and the Holy See signed the Armistice Agreement in front of them." Vivian smiled coldly. "You don't have to worry about these things. The Great Elder will make arrangements. You just have to do your own thing. Understand, Commander-in-Chief?" Lachlan bowed deeply after hearing this. His face was full of admiration. He straightened up and smiled, his eyes full of eagle-like vulture. Chapter 664. Over the next few days, the flames of war continued to spread throughout the Holy Roman Empire. The Achaemenid Empire officially declared war on the Holy Roman Empire. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers rushed towards the major cities of the Holy Roman Empire like a tidal wave. At the same time, more soldiers were sent to the border to suppress the Roland Empire. The Roland Empire, one of the three giants of the human world, unexpectedly made a silent statement about the war between the Achaemenid Empire and the Holy Roman Empire. They were even afraid of causing a misunderstanding with the Achaemenid Empire. The Holy Roman Empire sent a messenger to the border of the Holy Roman Empire to form an alliance, but he was immediately sent back. The 32nd king of the Roman Empire, Nikolai, was not a fool. The Scourge Church had the first divine powerhouse in the human world, which meant that the Achaemenid Empire was about to rise. This was the general trend. Whether they liked it or not, they could only accept it. King Nikolai was glad that he had helped and supported the Scourge Church when they were in trouble. Coupled with the Balrogs Academy, there should not be too much conflict. He even wanted to send someone to contact the Scourge Church. Asinaris fell, Ironstone Castle fell, Gloria fell, and all the major cities of the Holy Roman Empire fell one after another under the attack of the Scourge Church and the Achaemenid Empire. The bloody skull flag that symbolized the Scourge Church was flying above the city walls of each city. As the war unfolded, the major cities fell one after another. The Holy See and the Holy Roman Empire were really anxious. They were as anxious as ants on a hot pan. All kinds of letters were flying in like snowflakes. Some were asking for peace, some were asking for negotiations. At the same time, they were asking for help from the Parliament, who were thousands of miles away, hoping that the big shots in the Noah continent would intervene in this sudden war. Unfortunately, those people were disappointed. Just like the Roland Empire, the Parliament's attitude towards this war was also silent. Since the rise of the Scourge Church was unstoppable, why would they not accept it? The orcs ruled the Orc Empire, the elves ruled the Elven Forest, and the dragons ruled the world of Warcraft. It was normal that the Scourge Church, as one of the poles, unified the entire human world. In the Holy Roman Empire's royal palace of St. Paolo, a carnival was held. In the solemn and sacred main hall, moving music sounded. Noble women in beautiful clothes were dancing. Beautiful, beautiful ladies, beautiful, 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 beautiful women, beautiful, 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 and beautiful. The long square table was filled with exquisite food. Beautiful maids shuttled among the guests. Although there was a smile on their faces, there was a hint of sadness in their hearts. This is the Holy Empire's palace. It's so big, another female necromancer exclaimed. These two women were from a border city of the Abia Empire. They were sisters, about 21 or 22 years old. They were in their prime. The elder sister was a necromancer, and the younger sister was a necromancer. They appeared in the Holy Roman Empire's royal palace of St. Paolo. The Holy Roman Empire had fallen, and even the royal palace had fallen into the hands of the Abia Empire. The Holy See's defeat was irreversible. This grand banquet was held in honor of the Scourge Church and the Abia Empire soldiers who had performed meritorious deeds. The original owner of the royal palace had become a prisoner. The ministers who had pledged their loyalty to the Holy Roman Empire and vowed to live and die with the royal palace of St. Paolo were now trying to curry favor with their new master. Look, that's the commander-in-chief, Vivian. As the younger sister, the necromancer's eyes were sharp, and she immediately saw Vivian. At this moment, Vivian was wearing a black robe and holding a wine glass. She was chatting happily with several Abia Empire's generals, and a powerful undead aura emerged from her body. It's true, it's really Lady Vivian. As the elder sister, the necromancer was shocked. I didn't expect such a big shot like her to appear in such an occasion. Sister, don't you know? The younger sister smiled sweetly. Today, after she defeated the Holy Sun sent by the Holy See in front of everyone, she directly became a sacred domain powerhouse on the battlefield. If you ask me, half of this banquet is for her. Ah, I see, the elder sister said in realization. As the two sisters were talking, there was a slight movement in front of the royal palace's gates. The Grand Elder is here. The Grand Elder is here. The arrival of the Scourge Church's first divine undead Magus Homelin at this small royal palace banquet caused a commotion. Hearing that the Grand Elder had arrived, Vivian was stunned for a moment, but she immediately put down her wine glass with a smile and went forward to welcome him. Countless experts followed behind Vivian with reverence in their hearts. They wanted to see the peerless demeanor of the most mysterious Grand Elder of the Calamity Church, a divine domain expert. Make way. Make way. Don't push. A row of necromancers in heavy armor stood in a row, surrounding Homelin in the middle and escorting him in. Homelin's white hair fluttered in the wind, and his eagle-like eyes flashed. There was a smile on his face, and he seemed to be in a good mood. Welcome, Grand Elder. Vivian led everyone forward, placing one hand on her chest and slightly bending her knees in a standard salute. Rise, Vivian. Homelin smiled. His gaze fell on the large group of people beside Vivian, and his brows furrowed slightly. Vivian quickly stood up and said, Everyone disperse. I have something to discuss with the Grand Elder. Yes, Lady Vivian. Everyone was disappointed that they did not have the chance to speak with the Scourge Church's Grand Elder, the strongest human in the divine realm. However, they still listened to Vivian's advice and dispersed. So this is what the Grand Elder is like. I've finally seen it today. The female necromancer pulled her sister and slowly dispersed, looking back reluctantly. Is this a divine realm powerhouse? He doesn't seem to have much of an aura, and he can't even compare to Lady Vivian. The sister said hesitantly. What do you know? The Grand Elder has advanced to the divine realm, and his control over his power has already reached the realm of minute detail. On the other hand, Lady Vivian has just become a sacred domain powerhouse, so she naturally has a sharper aura. The strength of the two cannot be compared at all. The younger sister said, unconvinced. I see. The older sister nodded thoughtfully. In a side room in the corner of the palace, Homelin and Vivian sat facing each other. He held a glass of wine in his hand, but he did not drink it. Instead, he gently swirled it, quietly listening to Vivian report the situation of the war these days. Hearing that they did not encounter any decent resistance in the Battle of St. Paolo, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire, Homelin's face revealed a slight smile. So, the Holy Roman Empire's royal family has lost the will to resist? Homelin asked with a smile. Yes, They even sent people to contact me, hoping to surrender with dignity, Vivian said, and she hesitated for a moment. They also hope to retain the rights of the Charles royal family. At the same time, they will be infinitely loyal to the Scourge Church. Infinitely loyal? After hearing this word, Hamelin smiled. He picked up the wine bottle and took a sip. These secular royal families believe in the strong. If they also have a divine powerhouse, would they surrender so easily? Then he said, but you don't have to worry about this matter, and don't be in a hurry to make a decision. Yes, great elder. Vivian nodded and replied. After they finished talking about business, Hamelin raised his glass with a smile. Vivian, congratulations on becoming a powerhouse of the sacred domain. Thank you. Vivian raised her glass and clinked it with Hamelin's. She smiled and said, and congratulations to great elder for becoming a senator of the assembly. Ha ha ha. Hamelin laughed heartily, raised his glass, and drank it in one gulp. Are you wondering why I made the decision to have all the sacred domain powerhouses of the Scourge Church withdraw from the assembly? Vivian replied with a smile. At that time, I didn't quite understand, but now that I think about it, it should be just a pretense to put pressure on the assembly. That's right. Hamelin nodded approvingly. He put down his glass and stood up. Since the rise of the Scourge Church and the momentum to unify the entire human world is unstoppable, why would they reject a senator with divine power? Holy Roman Empire, Mount Hygel. Compared to the bustling imperial capital of St. Paulo, Mount Hygel, which was covered with snow, seemed so cold and cheerless. The huge oracle hall had lost its former glory. The former saintess of Guangming and the current lord of the Hall of Atonement, God Eli, reported to His Majesty the Pope about the situation of the war over the past few days. The Scourge Church had launched a large-scale attack and captured most of the cities, including the imperial capital of the Holy Roman Empire. The entire Holy Roman Empire had basically fallen. The most terrifying thing was that they had adopted a gradual and steady approach. They had only left Mount Hygel behind and were advancing forward in an encirclement. Obviously, these damned undead had set Mount Hygel as their final target for victory. God Eli could even foresee that in the near future, dozens of legions of the Scourge Church would successfully meet at the foot of Mount Hygel. Then, they would send the spokesman of God Guangming to the gallows one by one. Thinking of this, God Eli's heart suddenly shuddered. All of this was too frightening. Lord Pope, what should we do now? In a situation where asking for help from the council was fruitless, God Eli had no other choice. At this moment, she had lost her usual elegance and was like a little girl, looking panicked and helpless. At this moment, Pope seemed to have aged by dozens of years. He sat there quietly, like a walking corpse that had lost its vitality. Sigh. Pope slowly raised his head and let out a long sigh. His turbid eyes were full of anger. The indifference of the council towards the Holy See had broken his heart and extinguished his last flame of hope. At this moment, his heart was filled with despair. Pope Ernst slowly stood up and walked down from the throne step by step. The thick fur robe on his body slowly slid down, but he was completely unaware of it. He walked forward slowly, his mouth saying something like a madman, but it also seemed like he was saying nothing. Your Majesty Pope. God Eli stood up and called out after hesitating for a moment. Pope Ernst did not seem to hear her. Step by step, he walked out of the temple of God's prophecy. God Eli looked at the departing figure of His Majesty Pope and bit her lip. The corners of her eyes were slightly moist. God will not abandon us. Chapter 665. The moon could almost be seen from the tall oracle peak. On the edge of the cliff, which was as sharp as a sword, stood a trembling figure. It was an old man with white hair and beard. It was Pope. At this moment, Pope Ernst was staring at the snowflakes in the sky, deep in thought. He stood at the top of the oracle peak, stepping on the white clouds under his feet. His deep gaze penetrated the heavy fog and reached the distance. In an instant, Pope's eyes suddenly widened. What is that? I see it. I see it all. It's an ocean of blood. Countless undead armies march forward. Skeletons, zombies, ghouls, all the undead creatures that could be named were densely packed like ants. In the sky, A few abyssal skeletal dragons flew past from time to time. On the ground, countless banners fluttered in the wind. The blood-red skull banners with black and red as the main theme carried a strange and bloody aura as they fluttered in the wind. How? Is this possible? How can they be here so quickly? Seeing this, Pope's body trembled violently. He did not expect that the undead had already arrived at Mount Hyjal. These are undead, terrifying undead, damned heretics. Oh my God. How can these terrifying and ugly undead creatures appear in this world? They're completely incompatible with this beautiful world. No, definitely not, Pope cried out loudly. He clenched his fists so tightly that blue veins slowly protruded from his neck. Pum! Pope only felt his body tremble, and everything in front of him disappeared in an instant. So, all of this was an illusion. Pope heaved a sigh of relief. He used his hand to wipe off his forehead, but it was full of sweat. In this snowy day where the temperature was below zero, His Majesty Pope's back was already drenched in cold sweat. At this moment, Pope and Ernst's hearts were extremely heavy. Although the scene just now was an illusion, the Scourge Church's attack on the Holy See was real. Perhaps they would arrive here in a few days' time. Pope was not afraid of death. As a preacher, he was already prepared to teach with his life. As a believer of God Guangming, he was afraid that the world he loved would be tainted by evil. Is there really no other way? Pope murmured, a trace of confusion appearing on his face. God will not abandon us. At this moment, a voice suddenly appeared in his mind. God will not abandon us. As Pope, Ernst naturally knew that this was a sentence described in the 16th line on page 573 of the Holy Bible. God will not abandon us. Thinking of this, Pope's eyes became clear in an instant. He slowly raised his head, the expression on his face sincere and determined. The snow was still falling from the sky. The wind was roaring like a dragon rolling up the remnant clouds. A thin old man was struggling to climb over a high flight of stairs, reaching the high platform at the top of God's Peak. The top of God's Peak was known as the place closest to the sky in the whole of Noah continent. It was also known as the place closest to God by the believers of the Holy See. This old man was Pope. Pope was old, and the weather was not good. It was not easy to climb up this high God's Peak. At this moment, his chest was heaving rapidly, and the breath he exhaled turned into clouds of white mist. At this moment, he slowly took out something from his arms. It was a book, beautifully bound. The golden title page was inlaid with gilded words, and a faint luster spread out. That was the highest law of the Holy See, the book of God's prophecy. Legend has it that it was a divine artifact. Pope gently stroked this book of God's prophecy. His eyes were filled with infinite longing, as if he was holding a small baby in his hands. Touching the book of God's prophecy, Pope's gaze gradually became firm, and he began to pray. God, the sinner Ernst repents to you. Our Father in heaven, may the world worship your name as holy. May your kingdom come. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The world today has long been polluted by evil. The evil undead run rampant in the world, and the people who worship Guangming can only hide in the darkness. God, your children are suffering, but your loyal believers are powerless to change all of this. Pope's voice became louder and louder, and even covered the roaring snowstorm for a while. You are like a bright light in the darkness. The lost believers urgently need your guidance, Pope shouted loudly. He raised both his hands, and the book of God's prophecy in his hands. A trace of despair and solemnity filled the entire peak of God's prophecy. The snow in the sky seemed to be falling more rapidly. The rain and snow mixed with the wind, roaring and ruthlessly lashing out at everything in the world. Pope held the book of God's prophecy high, motionless. His expression was holy and solemn. Pope completed his prayer, but nothing happened. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, just like that. Pope held the book of God's prophecy in his hands and stood in the snowstorm for more than 3 hours, but still nothing happened. At this moment, Pope's expression was incomparably gloomy. As an old man in his 80s, and without the tyrannical physique of a warrior, it was already not easy for him to last until now. Pope finally could not hold it in any longer. He slowly put down the book of God's prophecy in his hands. Could it be God has abandoned us? Looking at the book of God's prophecy in his hands, Pope and Ernst only had disappointment in their eyes. At this moment, the book of God's prophecy in his arms suddenly glowed. What? Pope's gaze was incomparably shocked. The next moment, his heart was filled with ecstasy. This is the book of God's prophecy's light grew brighter and brighter. It moved slightly and slowly left Pope's arms. Rising into the air, God has already received my request. At this moment, Ernst's lips were trembling, and his body was trembling from excitement. Walala! The book of God's prophecy in the air opened by itself. The golden pages of the book unfolded one by one, like a bird spreading its wings to fly. In an instant, the book of God's prophecy shone brightly. Boom! The book of God's prophecy emitted a pillar of light, fiercely blasting towards the sky, making a dull sound. The powerful force seemed to have blasted a large hole in the sky. Space shattered, causing the world to shake. Countless dark clouds gathered, and with the pillar of light as the center, they revolved incessantly. Accompanied by countless bolts of lightning, the elements in the air became restless. Pope watched all this anxiously. At this moment, he only felt his throat dry up. Boom! 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 Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The center of the incessantly revolving vortex suddenly opened, and a vast and boundless power leaked out from within the vortex. This immense power descended upon the world, causing all living things to tremble. Legion of holy angels. Not far from Mount Hygel, an imposing figure appeared. It was Noah. At this moment, he was silently standing in the air. An unfamiliar and powerful force had opened up a spatial passage. Naturally, it could not escape the senses of a plane manager like him. At this moment, he was staring at the vortex in the distance, his brows tightly furrowed. As expected, what should come will still come, after a long while. Noah shook his head and sighed. Forget it, there's no point in worrying about these things. Let him be, Noah murmured, and his figure slowly disappeared into the air. At this moment, a human figure gradually appeared in the gigantic vortex. This is Pope's eyes suddenly froze. The human figure that appeared in the vortex was a half-naked human male. No, he was not human. He was taller than a human, and his skin was fairer than a human's. At the same time, his eyes were blue, and his facial features were different from a human's. The most eye-catching thing was that there was a pair of pure white wings on his back, gently flapping. An angel. He was the angel described in the Holy Bible. Pope became excited. This was the first time he had seen an angel described in the Holy Bible. As long as one was a believer of the Holy See, they would be extremely excited to see an angel in the legends. The angels described in the Holy Bible were also known as Holy Spirits. They were the messengers of God, carrying the will of God as they walked the world. They were the embodiment of beauty and holiness, and they could not tolerate the existence of evil in the world. At this moment, Pope finally saw the face of the angel clearly. It was an extremely perfect young man. The reason why he was described as perfect was from a human's point of view. His hair was a noble golden color, and it was slightly curly. It was very natural. His half-naked upper body was graceful, and the muscles on his body were just right. He did not appear burly, nor did he appear thin. His skin was as delicate as a baby's, without a single scar. He was slightly taller than a human, but he did not appear burly. His exquisite face, coupled with his perfect facial features, was enough to make all the female creatures in the human world go crazy. He was an angel, perfect and flawless. At this moment, the snowstorm stopped, and countless rays of light sprinkled down from the sky, dyeing the entire earth with a layer of gold. The angel stood quietly in the void, silently observing the world below. There was no expression on his face, but there was a feeling of disdain for the world. Not long after, he seemed to have sensed something. He frowned slightly, and a trace of displeasure appeared on his face. In this plane, he smelled an extremely unusual aura, and this aura made him feel disgusted. At this time, the angel's gaze fell on Pope, standing atop God's prophecy peak. He faintly smiled, and then descended, arriving in front of Pope. This angel's body was surrounded by a holy light, making it so that no one dared to look directly at him. His strength was unfathomable, and standing in front of him made one feel stifled. This was a peerless strength that surpassed a powerhouse of the divine realm. Noah continent. Holy See Pope, Sinner Ernst, respectfully welcomes the arrival of Lord Envoy. In front of the angel, Pope fell to his knees, an incomparably pious look on his face. In the legends, angels were servants of the gods, but to Ernst, they still had to be treated with the highest courtesy. "You are Pope, Ernst?" the angel slowly said. The language that came from his mouth was like a spring breeze. At this time, he slowly stretched out a hand. Pope understood. He knelt on one knee, stretched out his hands, and placed them in the hands of the angel. This was the highest courtesy of the Holy See. The angel faintly smiled, satisfied that he understood the etiquette of the Holy See. God will not abandon you. He will give the lost believers the correct guidance. Oh, God Guangming above. Pope was so excited that his voice trembled. Your loyal believer needs your help. Rise. The angel faintly smiled and withdrew his hand. It was a pair of hands as white as a woman's, extremely perfect. Yes, Lord Envoy. Pope calmed his excited mood and stood up. However, Sir Pope, there is one thing that you have misunderstood. I am not an angel, so you do not need to call me Lord Envoy. Pope was surprised and stood up. Then you are, God has already heard your call, so he sent me down. The angel glanced at him and faintly smiled, revealing a row of white teeth. The pair of wings on his back gently flapped as he spoke boldly. I'm the Son of God, walking the world with the sword of Guangming in my hand, vowing to destroy all darkness and evil. The angel paused for a moment and continued speaking. Chapter 666. Dozens of people were seated in the large hall of prophecy. In Pope Ernst's memory, the hall of prophecy had not been so lively in a long time. Pope Ernst had already left his original seat and was sitting respectfully in his place in the middle of the hall of prophecy. The one seated in the middle was the holy angel Andrew, who had descended from the main plane of order. He was God's emissary and represented God's will in descending to this small subcontinent. However, he was not the only one who had descended with Andrew. His personal guard had also followed him to this subcontinent. Dozens of angels were lined up in a row, surrounding God's emissary Andrew like stars surrounding the moon. These angels were all at least in the sacred domain, and a few of them were even at the peak of the sacred domain. However, the master of these angels, Andrew, was at the divine realm. The divine realm. Seeing the divine realm aura emanating from Andrew, Ernst could not help but feel excited. He had always hoped that the Holy See would also produce a divine realm expert to contend against the scourged church. Even if this person was not him, even if this person asked him to give up the position of Pope, he would not refuse. The other dozens of angels stood quietly in the surroundings, folding their wings and looking indifferent. In terms of appearance, these angels were not much different from humans. They were slightly taller, had fairer skin, and had an additional pair of wings on their backs. Andrew's eyes were tightly shut, his left and right fingers gently tapping on the armrest of his seat as he quietly listened to Pope's report. The few remaining sacred domain experts of the Holy See quietly sized up this angel who had descended by God's decree, a hint of curiosity in their eyes. Only the Lord of the Hall of Atonement, Godeli, looked at Andrew with a hint of passion in her eyes. Handsome appearance, noble status, powerful strength. All these factors added together were enough to make any woman go crazy, and Godeli was no exception. Especially that extremely perfect face, it even made people feel like they were hallucinating. This was not a real human being, but a dreamlike Prince Charming. The Pope's mouth was dry from talking. He wanted to describe the 100,000 years of history of the Holy See since the first Pope, Antonio, defeated the scourged church. This was not an easy task. It took 3 whole hours for Pope to finish narrating everything. When it came to the current situation of the Holy See, Pope's face was a little gloomy. After listening to the Pope, the holy angel Andrew opened his eyes. His face was calm as an ancient well. At this time, he spoke. To be honest, I'm very disappointed. As soon as Andrew opened his mouth, he negated all the efforts of the Holy See over the past 100,000 years. In other words, the Holy See had made a mess of everything for the past 100,000 years. Pope and the other three powerhouses of the Holy See had ugly looks on their faces. However, on account of Andrew's reputation as a son of God and a powerhouse from the divine realm, they did not make a sound. Andrew continued, "My father had secretly launched an attack against the Scourge Church in Amros, the predecessor of the Noah continent. He even led the legion of holy angels in a desperate battle against the Scourge army that had descended to the subplane. Both sides invested a large number of troops until the entire continent was destroyed. Only then did the Scourge army vanquish and obtain the final victory. It can be said that my father had invested a lot of resources in this area. But now," Andrew spoke slowly. At this moment, his face was frosty and his tone gradually became stern. "The annihilated Scourge Church has once again risen from the ashes. The entire continent is practicing evil magic, and the ugly spirits of the dead have once again run rampant in the human world. I want to ask you, all these years, what has the Holy See been doing?" Andrew's voice was not loud, but it buzzed in everyone's ears. It was accompanied by a powerful pressure that caused everyone to break out in cold sweat. They could not say a word. As Pope, Ernst was so ashamed that he wanted to find a hole to hide in. The Scourge Church had disappeared for 100,000 years, until a young necromancer called Ron appeared like a shooting star and re-established the Scourge Church, becoming the most powerful force in the human world. It had only been a few short years. During this period of time, Ron had been in power. No matter what, the Pope could not get away with it. It should be known that the struggle between the Holy See and the Scourge Church involved the struggle between the forces of the subplanes. These powerhouses of the main plane fought for faith and territory. It was common for them to fight openly and covertly and start wars. They constantly supported representatives in the subplanes and erected their faith to serve their interests. These legions of the main plane even controlled thousands of such subplanes and spread their faith in these subplanes. Just like the continent of Amros 100,000 years ago, the entire continent was under the absolute control of the Scourge Church. There was no space for Guangming practitioners to live here. It was because of this that after the Lich King left Amros, the Legion of Holy Angels planted a nail in the continent. This nail was the Holy Society. Receiving the great support of the Legion of Holy Angels from the main plane, the Holy Society thrived and continuously eroded the foundation of the Scourge Church's rule. After the Scourge Church lost the Lich King, it fell into discord. The two factions fought endlessly. All of this made the powerhouses of the Holy See, who were only at the Holy Society at that time, see hope. They incited the various powerhouses of Amros who were dissatisfied with the rule of the Scourge Church and fought with the Scourge Church. They greatly depleted the elite forces of the Scourge Church until they launched the final Holy War and destroyed the Scourge Church in one fell swoop. On the other hand, the Lich King led the Scourge army back to the main plane and fought a desperate battle with the Legion of Holy Angels. They fought until the continent of Amros was destroyed and all living beings migrated to a new continent. That was another story altogether. All in all, the disappearance of the Scourge Church from the continent of Amros was a scheme of the Legion of Holy Angels. It was all for the sake of seizing control over the continent of Amros. These high and mighty angels once thought that there were no more undead in the subplane of Noah. They had obtained complete victory, destroyed the undead, and spread Guangming to the world. It was a pity that they had miscalculated. 100,000 years later, the destroyed Scourge Church was once again rejuvenated. It exploded with powerful vitality and even produced a powerhouse from the divine realm. All of this made Andrew extremely angry. What the hell was the Holy Church doing? What the hell was the Holy Church doing? Not only did they not spread the faith of Guangming to every corner of the continent, but they were even attacked by evil forces to the Holy Mountain. If it wasn't for the mediation of a neutral organization called the Assembly, there would probably be no humans in the entire continent of Noah who believed in Guangming. Foolish, incompetent. This was Andrew's evaluation of the Pope. At this moment, his heart was filled with anger. He believed that this was a huge mistake, and someone had to take responsibility for it. Sir Oracle. The Pope and Ernst knelt down from their seats with a thud. They looked at Andrew's noble face and smiled sadly, their faces filled with endless regret. Sir Oracle, I can't deny that in this matter. As the Pope, I have an unshirkable responsibility. Let me bear all the blame in the name of blood. After Ernst said this, he immediately took out an exquisitely decorated dagger from his bosom, aimed it at his own heart, and viciously stabbed it. Sir Pope, the other three powerhouses of the Holy See, Ivan, Heron, and God Eli, all cried out in alarm. Heron's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. He rushed up like an arrow, snatched the dagger from Pope's hand, and casually threw it aside. Your Majesty, Pope, please don't do anything stupid, Ivan said loudly. These things have nothing to do with you at all. Yes, Sir Pope, death won't solve anything. God Eli also tried to persuade him. In the face of Pope's sudden action, Andrew sat quietly from beginning to end. He didn't even look at him. The other angels were the same. There was only indifference on their delicate and handsome faces. Heron glanced at Andrew, took a step forward, knelt on one knee, and mustered up his courage to speak. Sir Oracle, now is not the time to pursue responsibility. The army of the Scourge Church is advancing triumphantly and will soon reach Mount Hygel. For the sake of the millions of believers of the Holy See, for the sake of our devout faith, I think we should unite as one and destroy the Scourge Church. After Heron finished speaking, the entire temple of God fell into silence. It was so quiet that even the sound of a needle dropping could be heard. God Eli saw that the faces of the angels had changed a little. Those azure-blue eyes clearly contained a strong desire to kill. Even in the main plane, it was an extremely serious crime to verbally contradict an oracle from the main plane. Don't forget that to a certain extent, an oracle represented God. They represented God's will. They represented God's supreme authority. Contradicting an oracle was no different from contradicting God. Everyone broke out in cold sweat for Heron. Heron knelt on the ground and clenched his teeth, but he did not take a step back. He owed a debt of gratitude to Pope, so at this time, he had to stand up. Andrew's gaze gradually fell on Heron. Through his eyes, a strong pressure burst forth from his sword-like gaze. He said slowly, "Are you teaching me how to do things?" Heron only felt a boom in his mind. He felt a sweetness in his chest, and a trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. In just a moment, he was seriously injured. The power of an oracle was far beyond everyone's imagination. Heron's heart was filled with horror. He was amazed at the power of the oracle in front of him. He did not see him do anything, but he was already seriously injured. He understood that if the oracle wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as pinching an ant to death. No, I dare not. Heron's face was ashen, and he stepped back sadly. He knew that in front of this oracle, there was nothing he could do. Andrew remained expressionless. If it was not for the powerful aura just now, no one would know that he had made a move. His gaze fell on the old face of the Pope, and he snorted coldly. Fine. As for the matter of investigating who is responsible, let's wait until the war is over. If you want to wash away your crimes, you have to work hard for me. But you can't run away from the responsibility that you have to bear. Seeing that the oracle had let the Pope go, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Yes, thank you, Oracle. Ernst replied with a gloomy look. He knew that regardless of whether the undead were eliminated or not, the Scourge Church was destroyed. His position as the Pope had come to an end. After Andrew finished speaking, he fell into deep thought again. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the armrest of his seat. This was his habit of thinking. The Oracle Hall was quiet again. No one dared to breathe loudly for fear of interrupting the Oracle's thoughts. The rhythmic tapping finally stopped. Andrew raised his head and said slowly, "Where are the undead now?" Heron took a step forward and said, "Reporting to the Oracle, the undead have crossed the Leighton Mountains and are now heading towards Mount Hygel. They will reach Mount Hygel in about 3 days at the earliest." 3 days? Andrew paused for a moment and nodded. The severity of the situation was indeed beyond his imagination. Rodewald, here. An angel stepped forward. He was a burly middle-aged man, and he was also the head of the guards of Andrew, the Son of God. This angel named Rodewald had the strength of the peak of the sacred domain. You will lead the angel army to intercept them. Remember, don't let them meet at Mount Hygel. Yes, Prince Andrew. Chapter 667. On the endless plains, tens of thousands of undead slowly marched forward, like a group of black ants moving between the mountains. They were one of several undead legions. Skeletons, zombies, ghouls, and other undead creatures were the basic components of the undead legion. They were also the most numerous undead creatures, commonly known as cannon fodder. Behind these cannon fodder were a large number of necromancers, and other professions. If they wanted, they could summon more cannon fodder to fight. The endless undead army was a nightmare that all the city soldiers could not get rid of. These fearless undead creatures launched attacks with the momentum of a tide. Wherever they went, not even a blade of grass could survive. No one could resist this black tide, not even the strong ones of the sacred domain. The undead army advanced triumphantly all the way. After defeating several Holy Roman Empire regiments, all the cities surrendered. Some of them didn't even wait for the arrival of the undead army. They hung up white flags and opened their gates, waiting for the undead army to enter. Of course, there were still some places that resisted, such as the Holy Cathedral. The people who had been brainwashed by the Holy See would not give in so easily. They caused losses to the undead. However, such a smooth attack made some generals of the Scourge Church feel elated. They firmly believed that in a few days, the undead at the foot of Mount Hygel would launch a final attack on the Holy See. The Holy See would become a name and completely disappear in the long history of the Noah continent. They even believed that with the strength of the Scourge Church, it would not be difficult to attack the Orc Empire, the Elven Forest, and the World of Warcraft. Unifying the entire Noah continent would not be difficult as long as they were willing. The invincible undead would be the best cannon fodder. All creatures would live in fear under the shadow of the undead, just like the Scourge Church did 100,000 years ago. A Death Knight who looked like a general picked his teeth with a bamboo stick and said with a fake smile, "Hey buddy, how long until we reach Mount Hygel?" According to the distance, about 2 days. The necromancer beside him took out a map and looked at it, then replied, "But we still have 3 cities. Oh my God, 3 cities. The Death Knight, General wailed. Let me die. After we take down these 3 cities, it will take at least 7 days to reach Mount Hygel." The necromancer spread out his hands. "There's no other way. This was ordered by Commander-in-Chief Vivian. We cannot do it, right?" The Death Knight General rolled his eyes. "What do you say we go around them?" "Go around them?" The necromancer was obviously taken aback. He hesitated for a moment. This is against orders. If that happens, you and I will probably be court-martialed. But it's too slow now." The Death Knight raised his voice and said, "We only have 3 cities left, and it will take at least a few days to take them down. By the time we arrive at Mount Hygel, the Holy Church will have nothing left, and our contributions will be gone." But, although the necromancer knew that the other party was telling the truth, he still hesitated. Above them, as it's decided then, seeing that the staff officer was a little moved, the Death Knight patted him on the shoulder and smiled. "Don't forget, I'm the commander of this army. I'll take care of everything by myself." The necromancer was finally convinced and nodded. Suddenly, his expression froze and his eyes widened. Through the eyes of the crows in the sky, he saw something in the distance. It was an army in white clothes and white armor. They looked cold and stern, exuding a detestable holy aura. They were marching in neat steps towards them. "What's wrong?" The Death Knight saw the necromancer's strange behavior and asked. "Over there, about 5 kilometers away, there seems to be an army." The necromancer raised his hand slightly and pointed to the front. He murmured, "That's the army of the Holy See." "The army of the Holy See?" The Death Knight General heard and immediately asked, "How many people are there?" "About 10,000. The necromancer nodded and said, 10,000? Could it be the main force of the Holy See?" "Good. They finally can't hold back and attack. The Death Knight was excited. After saying that, he waved his hand and summoned a tall death horse. At the same time, he pulled out the knight's sword from his waist and raised it high. He shouted, "Haha, brothers, we have work to do. 5 kilometers ahead, there's an army of the Holy See, about 10,000 people. Haha, isn't this a reward delivered to our doorstep?" All the necromancers were energized when they heard that. Everywhere they went, all the cities surrendered. They hadn't tried a decent battle for a long time. It was like they had money but nowhere to spend it. They couldn't muster up any energy. Swish, swish, swish. Everyone pulled out their weapons, and the Death Knights mounted their death horses. "Pass down my order. All troops attack and destroy them. Leave no one alive." The Death Knight Legion commander shouted. At the same time, he rode his death horse and strode forward. "Kill! Kill! Kill!" All the Death Knights charged out like a whirlwind, and the other professionals quickly followed. It was rare to encounter the main force of the Holy See in a decisive battle. Who knew if the Holy See still had an army? Wait, wait, looking at the frenzied undead, a trace of hesitation appeared in the necromancer's eyes. Looking at the army, he had a feeling that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. "Forget it. Let's go take a look first." The necromancer sighed and summoned a gargoyle. He jumped on it. Smoke and dust rose on the plains. It was the first charge of the undead army and the Death Knights. Their army had tens of thousands of people and horses. With the addition of the summoned undead, their numbers could be increased tenfold to hundreds of thousands. It was a piece of cake to destroy a 10,000-strong army of the Holy See. "Speed up! Speed up!" The Death Knight general rode on the skeletal horse and galloped. His eyes were burning with fighting spirit. "Sir Rodewald, the undead are coming." In the Holy See army, a soldier-like person reported to Rodewald. They were part of Andrew's legion of holy angels and were led by Rodewald. These 10,000 people were the elites of the legion of holy angels. "They're here." Rodewald smiled. "It's good that they're here. It saves me the trouble of looking everywhere. Let's teach them a good lesson, these reckless fools." "Pass down the order. Prepare for battle," Rodewald said with a frosty expression. "Yes, Sir Guard Captain," the soldier replied loudly. "Get into battle formation immediately and prepare for battle." Following Rodewald's order, the well-trained legion of holy angels spread out with a swoosh. Everyone took out their weapons and looked ahead with cold expressions. He was getting closer and closer. In the eyes of the Death Knights, a row of troops wearing white clothes and white armor appeared in front of them. The flag with the red cross symbol fluttered in the wind. Their shields and clothes also had the same red cross symbol. It was indeed the army of the Holy See. A sinister smile appeared on the Death Knight's face. These people were all going to die. "Kill!" With a roar like the mountains and seas, the blood-red skull flag fluttering in the wind became more ferocious. At this time, the undead army launched a charge. "Archers, get ready. Fire!" Following the command of the Holy Angel Guard Captain, the second row of archers raised the crossbows in their hands. Countless arrows with the power of Guangming suddenly shot out. Bang! 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 Dozens of undead fell in response. "Archers, fire!" Another wave of arrows rained down, and another batch of undead fell. Boom! 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 The sudden attack stunned all the undead. They hadn't even fought with the enemy, but they had already lost close to 100 people. The Death Knight's heart was dripping blood. Ever since the start of the war, his army had never suffered such a huge loss. "Necromancer!" the Death Knight's commander roared. "They're here!" The necromancer's voice came from the sky. "Skeleton warriors, mages, black knights, come out." Kacha kacha! The ground solidified and turned into a black substance. At the same time, countless white skeletons drilled out from the ground. The necromancer Archmage in the sky led his team of necromancers to launch an attack at the same time. Countless skeletons were summoned, and the undead army's numbers suddenly increased by several times. The momentum was great. Awoo! Awoo! The undead army launched an attack under the lead of the Black Knights. That's right, they were cannon fodder to deplete the enemy's strength. It's still these useless skeletons. Haven't the undead made any progress after all these years? Seeing the countless undead rushing over like a tide, Rodewald's face revealed a trace of a smile. Then his smile disappeared. All soldiers, prepare for battle. Following the command of Rodewald, all the soldiers of the Legion of Holy Angels prepared for battle. Boom, boom, boom. The soldiers of the Legion of Holy Angels had already clashed with the undead army. The battle was intense. What? At this moment, the Death Knight Legion commander was completely stunned. The army of the Holy Church in front of him didn't collapse like a tidal wave. Instead, they had the upper hand. Countless undead creatures were burned into ashes by the weapons that were shining with holy light. Holy Crusade, attack. Following Rodewald's command, a troop of heavy infantry with only their eyes exposed moved out. They charged out like a heavy tank, crushing everything in their path. Even the Black Knights, who were known for their defense, were only able to fight to a draw. The Holy Angel Guards harvested the lives of the undead soldiers like harvesting wheat. The summoned undead creatures were as fragile as paper under the illumination of the holy light and turned into ashes one after another. And the necromancers who had lost their protection were killed one by one. This is impossible. The leader of the Death Knights no longer had any thoughts of underestimating the enemy. He was shocked by the strength of this army. At this moment, he only felt fear. Holy light, illumination, purification, holy flame fire. As Guangming used his skills one after another, more than half of the undead army was killed or injured. This army of the Holy Sea was terrifyingly strong. The undead army that was invincible was blocked by a powerful force on this boundless plain. Lord Legion Commander, let's go. At this moment, the necromancer had already killed his way to the side of the Death Knights. At this moment, he was covered in blood. He pulled the Legion Commander's arm and said loudly, "Go." The leader of the Death Knight's heart was completely cold. That hateful army of the Holy Sea had killed many of his brothers. How could he leave now? At this moment, the leader of the Death Knights suddenly turned around and stabbed his sword into a soldier of the Holy Sea. He then pulled it out. That person fell down with blood spurting out. He roared, "No, I can't go. I want to kill them. I want to fight with them." "No," the necromancer said loudly. "We're no match for them. Look carefully. These people are not human. They are not human." The leader of the Death Knights was stunned. His gaze fell on one of the soldiers of the Holy Sea. That's right. Although these people looked similar to humans, from their faces, they were obviously not human. How is this possible? The leader of the Death Knights felt that he had fallen into a trap. These people are not human. Who are they? Where did they come from? What is their relationship with the Holy Sea? The necromancer shook his head desperately, indicating that he did not know. "Let me tell you." At this moment, a majestic voice came from the sky. The two of them looked up abruptly and were shocked. They saw that above their heads, a figure had appeared out of nowhere. The figure was a middle-aged man. He wore simple white armor and held a white one-handed longsword in his hand. His expression was cold. The most strange thing was that he had a pair of huge white wings on his back that were gently flapping. A powerhouse of the sacred domain? The eyes of the Death Knights and necromancers widened. Their hearts were filled with shock. To be able to float in the sky and emit a powerful aura at the same time, he was undoubtedly a powerhouse of the sacred domain. The figure stood quietly in the air and looked at the two of them with a cold smile. "Although I really want to tell you, I don't think you have time to listen." With that, he raised his sword and slashed down. Bang. Two pillars of blood suddenly splashed more than 10 meters into the air, accompanied by two rolling heads that fell heavily to the ground. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.